The night Alara Vance spoke in a dead language, she signed her own death warrant, a whispered insult in an ancient dialect. A waitress who shouldn't understand, a crime lord who suddenly realized his biggest threat had been serving him wine for months. In the shadows of New York's most exclusive underground restaurant, power shifted with a single sentence. And two people who should never have crossed paths became locked in a game where trust is poison, and survival means becoming the monster you've been hiding from. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale travels. The Velvet Iris didn't appear on any map. Tucked beneath a converted brownstone in Manhattan's Tribeca district, accessible only through a wine cellar that required 3 separate passwords and a facial recognition scan, the restaurant catered to a clientele that valued discretion above all else. Here, illegal deals were brokered over 30-year scotch. Blood money was laundered through wine futures, and occasionally people who asked too many questions simply never left. Alara Vance had worked there for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not that anyone had bothered to count. She moved through the dining room like smoke, present but unnoticed, efficient but forgettable. Her uniform was always pressed, her dark hair always pinned in that same simple bun, her eyes always downcast in the particular way that made wealthy men forget she existed the moment she stepped away from their table. She'd perfected the art of invisibility, and in a place like the Velvet Iris, that was the most valuable skill anyone could possess. The evening started like any other Thursday. Alara arrived at 5:30, changed into her uniform in the cramped staff room, and began her pre-service ritual, polishing already gleaming silverware, checking the temperature of the wine cellar, arranging flowers with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. "Table 7 tonight," Marco, the floor manager, said without looking up from his clipboard. He was a thin man with nervous hands and the perpetual expression of someone expecting bad news. "VIP reservation. Adrian Volkov." Alara's hands didn't falter as she adjusted a stem of white orchid, but something cold slithered down her spine. "Understood," she said, her voice perfectly neutral. Marco finally glanced at her, his eyes worried. "You know who that is?" "I've heard the name." "Then you know to be invisible tonight. More invisible than usual." He leaned closer, dropping his voice. "They say he once killed a man for looking at him wrong. Just don't engage. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't even breathe too loud." Alara nodded, the model of a compliant employee. "Of course." But as Marco walked away, her reflection in the polished silver betrayed nothing of the adrenaline now coursing through her veins. Adrian Volkov. She'd spent 3 years avoiding exactly this moment, building a life so mundane, so perfectly ordinary, that no one from her past would ever think to look for her here. And now the past was booking table 7. What's she? Adrian Volkov arrived at 8:15, fashionably late in the way that powerful men often were. Alara watched from the service station as he entered, flanked by 2 men who had bodyguard written in every line of their muscled frames. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s perhaps, with the kind of severe, angular features that looked carved rather than born. Dark hair swept back from a high forehead, eyes the color of winter ice. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and he moved with the fluid confidence of a predator who'd never encountered anything he couldn't kill. "Mr. Volkov," the maitre d' gushed, practically bowing. "Your table is ready. We're honored." "Just show me where to sit," Adrian said, his accent barely noticeable but unmistakably Eastern European beneath the polished English. "I'm not here for ceremony." They settled at table 7, the best position in the restaurant, tucked into a corner that offered a view of the entire room while remaining shadowed enough for privacy. Adrian sat with his back to the wall, as Alara knew he would. Men like him never left their backs exposed. She gave them 5 minutes before approaching, her hand steady as she carried water glasses on a silver tray. "Good evening, gentlemen." Her voice was soft, trained to be heard but not remembered. "May I start you with still or sparkling water?" Adrian didn't look at her. None of them did. To men like this, waitstaff were furniture that occasionally moved. "Sparkling," one of the bodyguards grunted. She poured in silence, then retreated to fetch menus. The first course passed without incident. The second course as well. Adrian conducted business in low tones with his associates, while Alara delivered plates and cleared them with the efficiency of machinery. She heard fragments, names she recognized from old intelligence briefings, territorial disputes in Brooklyn, something about a shipment from Gdansk, but kept her face carefully blank. This was the game. Stay small, stay invisible, survive. Everything changed during the third course. One of Adrian's guests had arrived late, a man named Dmitri who smelled like expensive cologne and cheaper violence. He was drunk before he sat down, his voice carrying across the dining room in a way that made Marco wince. "Adrian, my friend!" Dmitri clapped him on the shoulder with the kind of familiarity that made Adrian's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I hear you're expanding into Queens. Bold move. Stupid, but bold." "It's strategic," Adrian said, his tone carefully controlled. "The Italians are weak there right now." "Weak? Or just waiting for idiots to overstep?" Dmitri laughed, too loud. Then his eyes landed on Alara as she approached to refill wine glasses. "Speaking of weak, they hire them younger and prettier every year, don't they?" Alara kept her expression neutral, her movements practiced. "More wine, sir?" "Oh, she speaks!" Dmitri grinned, revealing gold teeth. "Tell me, sweetheart, you like working here? Serving men like us?" "Dmitri." Adrian's voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. "What? I'm just being friendly." Dmitri reached out and grabbed Alara's wrist as she poured, making the wine splash slightly. "You should smile more. You're too pretty to look so serious." Every instinct in Alara's body screamed to break his wrist, to use the wine bottle as a weapon, to respond with the violence she'd been trained to employ. Instead, she did what any frightened waitress would do. She pulled away gently, murmured, "Excuse me," and hurried toward the kitchen. Behind her, she heard Adrian's voice, colder now. "Touch the staff again, and we're done here." "Come on, we're done." Alara made it to the kitchen before her hands started shaking. She set the wine bottle down carefully, braced herself against the counter, and took 3 slow breaths. This was fine, this was manageable. Just a few more hours, and they'd be gone, and she could go back to being nobody. "You okay?" Carlos, one of the line cooks, asked. "Fine," she said automatically. "Just needed a moment." She returned to the floor 10 minutes later, composed and professional. The drunk Dmitri was gone, escorted out from what she gathered. The atmosphere at table 7 had shifted, tenser now. Adrian was in conversation with someone new, a silver-haired man who'd arrived during her absence. Alara approached to clear plates, her movements as unobtrusive as possible. That's when she heard it. The silver-haired man was speaking in a language that made Alara's blood freeze. Not Russian, though it sounded similar to the untrained ear. This was older, rarer, a dialect from a specific region in the Caucasus Mountains that had fewer than 10,000 living speakers. She'd learned it during her training because organizations like hers always prepared for obscure contingencies. And he was using it to insult Adrian. The phrases were crude, dismissive, calling him a city-soft pretender, questioning his legitimacy, suggesting his power was built on his father's corpse rather than his own merit. The kind of insults designed to provoke, delivered in a language the speaker assumed no one else in this Manhattan restaurant could possibly understand. Adrian's face remained impassive, but Alara could see the muscle ticking in his jaw. He understood enough to catch the tone, if not the exact words. She should have stayed silent, should have cleared the plates and vanished back into anonymity, should have remembered that invisible people don't speak up, don't engage, don't exist beyond their function. But something in the silver-haired man's smug expression, in the way he thought himself so clever, so untouchable, triggered something in Alara she'd buried for 3 years. As she reached for a plate, she spoke. Quiet, calm, in the same ancient dialect. "Insulting a man to his face while hiding behind a dead language doesn't make you clever. It makes you a coward." The effect was instantaneous. Every head at the table snapped toward her. The silver-haired man's face drained of color. Adrian's eyes, those cold, winter eyes, fixed on her with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. "What did you say?" Adrian asked, his voice dangerously soft. He switched to English, but his gaze never left Alara's face. Alara's mind raced. 3 years of careful invisibility, destroyed in a single moment of pride. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, could sense Marco's panic from across the floor, could practically hear the alarms blaring in her own head. But she'd already stepped off the cliff. The only direction now was down. She met Adrian's eyes directly for the first time, abandoning the downcast, submissive posture she'd maintained for years. When she spoke again, it was still in that rare dialect, but slower, deliberate. "I said that your associate lacks the courage to insult you in a language you understand. He believes you're deaf to his disrespect." Then she turned to the silver-haired man, switching to flawless Russian. "He's not." The silence that followed felt like a living thing, thick and suffocating. The silver-haired man's hand moved toward his jacket, toward where Ilara knew he kept a weapon. But Adrian raised one finger, a minute gesture that froze everyone at the table. "Interesting," Adrian said, still in English, his eyes still locked on Ilara. "Very interesting." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with the focus of a jeweler examining a diamond that had appeared inexplicably in a pile of gravel. For the first time since entering the restaurant, he truly saw her, not as furniture or background noise, but as a person, a mystery, a threat. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ilara Vance." The lie came smoothly, 3 years of practice making it as natural as breathing. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years. "And in those 3 years you've been, what, studying obscure Caucasian dialects in your spare time?" His tone was almost amused, but his eyes remained lethal. "That's quite a hobby." Ilara's mind calculated angles, exits, potential weapons. The wine bottle she'd set down was 8 feet away. Too far. The steak knife on the table was closer, but reaching for it would trigger the bodyguards. The best option was still de-escalation, though that ship might have already sailed. "I studied linguistics in college," she said, which was technically true, if one considered classified intelligence training a college. "Some languages stuck with me. Linguistics." Adrian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, do all linguists listen to private conversations and offer unsolicited translations?" "Only when the conversation concerns the person being insulted." Ilara kept her voice steady. "I apologize if I overstepped. It won't happen again." "No," Adrian said quietly. "It won't." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but understood. Ilara felt the familiar ice of adrenaline flooding her system, the old training kicking in despite 3 years of rust. She calculated her survival odds if this turned violent, poor but not impossible. 2 bodyguards, both armed. Adrian himself, almost certainly armed. 15 other diners who'd scatter at the first gunshot. 3 exits, but only one she could reach in under 10 seconds. She was preparing to move when Adrian did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, more surprised than amused, but genuine. He shook his head, studying Ilara with renewed interest. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Sir, I'm working." "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Ilara glanced toward Marco, who looked ready to have a heart attack, then slowly lowered herself into the chair across from Adrian. Every nerve in her body screamed that this was wrong, that sitting at the table violated every rule of invisibility she'd built her life around. But refusing a man like Adrian Volkov wasn't really an option. "Tell me something," Adrian said, switching to the rare dialect. His pronunciation less fluent than Ilara's, but competent. "Where does a waitress in Manhattan learn a language spoken by maybe 3 villages in the entire world?" Ilara considered her options. Lying further would only dig the hole deeper, but the truth was impossible. So she did what she'd been trained to do. She threaded the needle between them. "My grandmother was from the region," she replied in the same language. "She taught me before she died. Said the language was dying and someone should remember it." Half-truth. Her grandmother had been from there, though Ilara had never met her. The intelligence files she'd memorized 10 years ago had contained enough biographical detail to build a plausible cover story. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then switched back to English. "Your grandmother. How convenient." "Not particularly," Ilara said. "She died when I was 12, cancer. And yet you maintained fluency in a language with no practical application for over a decade." Adrian's smile was sharp. "Remarkable dedication." Across the table, the silver-haired man had recovered from his shock enough to speak. Adrian, this is absurd. Fire the girl and let's continue. You're dismissed, Victor, Adrian said without looking at him. Leave, now. Victor's face flushed red. You can't be serious. Over some waitress who… I said leave. The temperature in Adrian's voice dropped to sub-zero. Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and stormed toward the exit. His bodyguards followed, one of them shooting Alara a look that promised future violence. When they were gone, Adrian returned his attention to Alara. You embarrassed him, he said conversationally. Victor is proud. Proud men tend to seek revenge. I'll be careful, Alara said. Careful. Adrian's smile widened slightly. Yes, I imagine you will be. Tell me, Alara Vance, who studied linguistics in college, what else are you careful about? The question felt like a trap. Alara kept her expression neutral. I'm not sure I understand. I think you do. Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on hers. I think you understand perfectly, because I've been coming to this restaurant for 2 years, and I've seen you here before. Background, wallpaper, completely unremarkable. But tonight, you spoke 3 languages fluently, including one that fewer people speak than there are streets in this city. You assessed threats, calculated angles, and made a decision to insert yourself into a dangerous situation. That's not linguistics. That's training. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained calm. You're mistaken. Am I? Adrian reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, giving her time to see it wasn't a weapon. He pulled out a phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward her. The screen showed a photograph. Grainy, surveillance quality, but clear enough. It depicted a woman in tactical gear, her face partially obscured by a balaclava, exiting a building that was very much on fire. The timestamp read 3 years and 4 months ago. The Moscow incident, Adrian said quietly. 6 dead. Building burned to the foundation. No one ever claimed responsibility, but certain interested parties have been looking for a woman matching this description ever since. Alara stared at the photograph, her mind working rapidly. The angle was wrong, taken from a satellite probably, or a drone. She'd been careful to avoid ground-level cameras, but apparently not careful enough. That could be anyone, she said. True. The face is obscured, but there's this. He swiped to another image, this one a close-up of the tactical vest visible in the first photo. A small emblem was barely visible on the shoulder, a stylized raven against a shield. This symbol. It belongs to a very specific organization, one that supposedly doesn't exist anymore. Alara said nothing. Confirming would be fatal. Denying would be pointless. Adrian leaned back, pocketing his phone. Here's what I think, Alara Vance. I think you're not a linguistics student who happened to retain a grandmother's dying language. I think you're something much more interesting. And I think the reason you've been invisible here for 3 years is because you're hiding from people who would very much like to find you. If that were true, Alara said carefully, why would I risk exposure by speaking up tonight? That, Adrian said, is an excellent question. Pride? Instinct? A moment of weakness? He smiled. Or maybe you're tired of being invisible. Before Alara could respond, Marco appeared at the table, his face pale. Mr. Volkov, I apologize profusely for any disturbance. I assure you this employee will be… She'll be nothing, Adrian interrupted. In fact, I'd like to hire her. The words hung in the air like a grenade with a pulled pin. What? Marco stammered. Your waitress. I'd like to hire her for private service at my estate. Adrian's tone was casual, as if discussing the weather. I'm hosting a dinner next week. Need someone who can navigate complex social situations. Someone with language skills. Someone discreet. Alara's instincts screamed danger. This was how it started. A job offer, a show of generosity, and then the trap closed. But refusing would raise more questions, create more problems. The best option was to play along, accept, and then disappear before the next week arrived. That's very generous, she said, but I'm quite happy with my current position. I'll pay you $10,000 for the evening. The number was absurd, far beyond what anyone would pay for a waitress, which meant it wasn't really about the waitressing. It was a test, a challenge, an invitation into a game that Alara had spent 3 years avoiding. Mr. Volkov, Marco said quickly, sensing an opportunity. I'm sure we can arrange for Alara to accommodate your needs. The Velvet Iris prides itself on, I'm addressing her, not you, Adrian said, his eyes never leaving Alara's face. What do you say, Alara? One evening. Good pay, a chance to put those language skills to better use than translating insults. Every rational part of Alara's brain shouted to refuse, to run, to vanish tonight, and never look back. But she'd learned long ago that running from men like Adrian only made them chase harder. Better to accept, play the role, and extract herself cleanly than to trigger his hunting instincts. I accept, she said. Adrian's smile was triumphant. He pulled a business card from his jacket and slid it across the table. My assistant will contact you with details. Don't be late. He stood, his bodyguards immediately flanking him. Before leaving, he paused, leaning down so his words were for her alone. One more thing, he said in that rare dialect, his breath warm against her ear. If you run, I'll find you. And I'm very good at finding things that don't want to be found. Then he was gone, sweeping out of the restaurant with the authority of a king leaving his court. Alara sat frozen at the table, the business card heavy in her hand. Around her, the restaurant slowly resumed its normal rhythm, conversations restarting, glasses clinking, the world moving forward as if the last 20 minutes hadn't just detonated her entire carefully constructed life. Marco appeared at her elbow, his voice a frantic whisper. What just happened? Did you just get hired by Adrian Volkov? Do you have any idea who that man is? Alara stared at the business card. Simple, elegant, with just a phone number embossed in silver. No name, no address, just a number and an implicit threat. Yes, she said quietly. I know exactly who he is. Alara's apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in Washington Heights. Small, sparse, deliberately forgettable. She'd rented it under her false identity 3 years ago, paying cash, leaving no digital footprint. The kind of place where neighbors didn't ask questions and landlords didn't pry as long as rent arrived on time. She climbed the stairs slowly, her mind racing through contingencies. The apartment was already packed, in a sense. She'd maintained a go-bag for 3 years, ready to disappear at a moment's notice. Passport, cash, burner phones, 3 different ID sets. Everything she needed to vanish. But as she unlocked her door and stepped inside, she knew it wasn't that simple anymore. Adrian Volkov had seen her, really seen her, and men like him didn't forget faces, especially faces that came with mysteries attached. Running now would only confirm his suspicions, mark her as prey worth hunting. She needed a better plan. Alara moved through her apartment with practiced efficiency, checking for signs of intrusion. The strand of hair she'd left across the door was intact, the dust pattern on her windowsill undisturbed, the book on her nightstand exactly where she'd left it, spine aligned with the edge of the table. Satisfied that she was alone, she pulled out her laptop, a cheap, clean device with no ties to her real identity, and began researching. Adrian Volkov, 34 years old, inherited his father's organization 5 years ago after the old man died of a conveniently timed heart attack. Expanded operations into legitimate businesses, real estate, import-export, private security, while maintaining control of less legal ventures. Reputation for being smart, ruthless, and dangerously curious about puzzles, which was exactly what Alara had made herself by opening her mouth tonight. She pulled up the photo he'd shown her, or rather, she found it in the encrypted databases she'd hoped never to access again. The Moscow incident, a black ops mission gone wrong, or right, depending on one's perspective. 6 targets eliminated, critical intelligence recovered, a building burned to erase evidence, and a photograph that should never have existed, now in the hands of a crime lord with too much interest in solving mysteries. Alara closed the laptop and sat in the dark, thinking. The organization she'd worked for, the one represented by that raven and shield emblem, had disbanded 3 years ago, officially. But official meant very little in the world of covert intelligence. Someone was still watching, still keeping files, still dangerous to anyone who'd been part of the operations. And now Adrian knew enough to start pulling threads. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number, which she almost never answered, but something made her check the message. Dinner's next Friday at 8 p.m. A car will collect you at 7:30 from your apartment. Don't worry, we already have your address. V. Alara stared at the message, ice flooding her veins. They'd found her apartment. Already. Less than 2 hours after the encounter, Adrian's people had tracked down her address, which meant they'd followed her home or accessed records, or... A second message arrived. Sleep well, Alara. We have so much to discuss. She deleted both messages and stared at the dark window, seeing her reflection overlaid against the New York night. 3 years of invisibility, destroyed. 3 years of peace, shattered. And now a choice. Run and be hunted, or stay and play a game with a man who collected dangerous secrets the way other people collected art. Alara thought of Victor's parting look, the promise of revenge in his eyes. Thought of Adrian's smile, sharp and interested. Thought of the photograph from Moscow and all the ghosts attached to it. Then she thought of who she'd been before becoming a waitress, before learning to be small and quiet and forgettable. Back when she'd been the ghost in the room, the threat no one saw coming, the blade in the dark. Maybe she was tired of being invisible. Maybe it was time to remember how to be dangerous. The week passed in a strange, suspended tension. Alara continued working at the Velvet Iris, maintaining her role as the quiet, efficient waitress. But she caught Marco watching her with new wariness, saw other staff members whispering when she passed. The story of her confrontation with Adrian's guest had spread, mutated, grown larger with each retelling. Some versions had her insulting a Russian mobster to his face. Others claimed she'd worked as a UN translator. One particularly creative rumor suggested she was actually a spy working undercover, which was close enough to the truth to make Alara's skin prickle. She ignored them all, focused on preparation. In the quiet hours after her shifts, she ran drills she hadn't practiced in years. Hand-to-hand combat sequences in her cramped apartment, evasion patterns on midnight runs through Central Park, memory exercises to keep her cover story straight. The rust of 3 years fell away slowly, muscle memory returning, instincts sharpening. By Thursday night, she felt almost ready. Friday arrived cold and clear, one of those crisp November evenings when New York felt more alive than ever. Alara finished her shift at the Velvet Iris early. Marco had given her the night off without her asking, probably hoping to distance the restaurant from whatever came next, and returned to her apartment. At 7:15, she stood before her mirror, studying her reflection. She'd chosen a simple black dress, elegant but not flashy, paired with low heels that she could run in if necessary. Her dark hair was down for once, falling past her shoulders in soft waves. Minimal makeup, a thin silver bracelet on her left wrist that concealed a lockpick set. No other jewelry. She looked like someone going to a dinner party. Harmless. Forgettable. Perfect. At 7:30 exactly, a car pulled up outside her building. A black Mercedes with tinted windows, so cliché it was almost funny. Alara took one last look at her apartment, touched the go-bag hidden in her closet as a reminder that escape was still possible, and headed downstairs. The driver was a large man with a face like weathered stone. He opened the door without speaking, waited for her to enter, then closed it with a definitive thunk that sounded unsettlingly like a cell door locking. They drove in silence through Manhattan, heading uptown. Alara watched the city slide past through tinted windows, cataloging landmarks, planning escape routes. The car eventually crossed into the Bronx, then into Westchester County, leaving the city behind. Adrian's estate, because of course it was an estate, sat on 15 acres of carefully manicured grounds, hidden behind iron gates and high stone walls. The kind of property that screamed old money, though Alara knew Adrian's fortune was far newer and far bloodier than the architecture suggested. The house itself was a massive Georgian colonial, all white columns and symmetrical windows lit up against the dark like a beacon. Or a trap. The driver parked in a circular driveway, opened her door, and gestured toward the entrance. Alara stepped out, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the lion's den with her head high. The door opened before she could knock. "Miss Vance?" Punctual. The woman who greeted her was in her 50s, dressed in an impeccable gray suit with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I'm Mrs. Sokolov, Mr. Volkov's head of household. Please, follow me." Inside, the house was exactly what Alara expected. Expensive, tasteful, decorated with art that was probably legitimate and probably worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. But beneath the veneer of culture and sophistication, she could sense the truth. Armed men stationed at careful intervals. Security cameras in every corner. the faint scent of gun oil that no amount of fresh flowers could quite mask. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. Mrs. Sokolov led her through a marble hallway to a formal dining room where a table was set for 12. Crystal gleamed under chandelier light. Silver cutlery reflected like small knives. "Mr. Volkov will join you shortly," Mrs. Sokolov said. "Please make yourself comfortable. May I bring you a drink?" "Water, please." The woman nodded and departed, leaving Alara alone in the opulent room. She resisted the urge to examine her surroundings too obviously, aware that cameras were certainly watching. Instead, she stood by one of the tall windows, looking out at the grounds, and waited. She didn't have to wait long. Punctual and composed. Impressive. Adrian's voice came from behind her, smooth as silk over steel. Alara turned to find him entering through a different door, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been designed specifically for his frame, which it probably had been. "You said not to be late," Alara replied calmly. "I did." He crossed the room to stand near her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, cedar and smoke. "Though I wasn't entirely certain you'd come." "Why wouldn't I? You're paying well. Because you're smart enough to know this isn't really about serving dinner." Adrian smiled, that sharp, dangerous expression that never touched his eyes. "We both know that, don't we?" Alara met his gaze directly. "Then why am I here?" "Because I'm curious," Adrian said simply. "I've built my life on understanding threats and opportunities, knowing which is which before anyone else does. And you, Alara Vance, are the most interesting puzzle I've encountered in years." "I'm a waitress." "You're a lie." He said it without heat, almost admiringly. A very good lie, but a lie nonetheless. The question is, what are you lying about? Who are you hiding from? And most importantly, can I use you? Before Alara could respond, voices echoed from the hallway. Adrian's expression shifted to something more pleasant, more public, as guests began arriving. "We'll continue this later," he said quietly. "For now, I actually do need your language skills. Several of my guests tonight don't speak English well, and I prefer to know exactly what's being said in my own home." The evening that followed was surreal in its normalcy. Alara found herself moving between languages with fluid ease. Russian, Ukrainian, that rare Caucasian dialect, even Mandarin for one guest who arrived late. She translated business discussions, facilitated negotiations, smoothed over cultural misunderstandings. It was work she was uniquely qualified for, using skills from her old life in a context that felt bizarrely mundane. Adrian watched her throughout, his attention never fully on his guests, always partially on her. She caught fragments of dangerous conversations. A shipping route through the Black Sea. A politician in Brooklyn who needed convincing. Something about rare earth minerals and Chinese intermediaries. The kind of information that could get someone killed in the wrong hands. And Adrian was letting her hear all of it. The trap became clearer with each passing hour. He was testing her, yes, but also implicating her. Every conversation she translated, every secret she heard, bound her more tightly to him. Knowledge was currency in this world, and he was making her rich with it, which meant he was also making her complicit. By the time the last guest departed near midnight, Alara felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. She'd spent 5 hours maintaining perfect composure, navigating conversations loaded with threat and subtext, all while Adrian watched her like a scientist observing a fascinating specimen. When they were alone again, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one. "You were excellent tonight," he said, handing her a glass. "My guests were impressed, especially Anatoly. He said your accent was better than his wife's, and she grew up in Grozny." "Thank you," Alara said neutrally. "You're not going to ask me what all of that was about? What you just helped facilitate?" "Would you tell me if I asked?" "No," Adrian smiled. "But most people would ask anyway. You didn't. You just absorbed, cataloged, filed away for later use." He took a sip of his drink. "That's training, Alara. That's discipline. That's not something you learn in college." Alara said nothing, sipping her own whiskey. It was excellent, smooth and complex, the kind of thing meant to be savored, or used as liquid courage. "I had you investigated," Adrian continued conversationally. After last week. Hope you don't mind. Her stomach tightened, but her expression remained calm. And what did you find? Not much, which is itself interesting. He moved to stand by the window, looking out at his grounds. Alara Vance, born in Philadelphia, supposedly. Attended college at a small school in Pennsylvania. Worked various service jobs before ending up in New York. No criminal record, no social media, no digital footprint worth mentioning. You're a ghost, Alara. Some people value privacy. Privacy, yes. But you don't have privacy. You have erasure. There's a difference. He turned back to her. Want to know what I think? I suspect you'll tell me regardless. That sharp smile again. I think Alara Vance was created 3 years ago. I think whoever made her was professional, good enough to fool standard background checks, which is quite good, but not good enough to fool someone like me who knows what manufactured identities look like. He paused. I've used enough of them myself. Alara's mind raced through options. Deny everything? Partially confirm? Run? The whiskey glass in her hand could be a weapon if she threw it at his face, but the security team would be on her before she reached the door. Let's say you're right, she said carefully. What would you want from someone like that? Honesty, for starters. Adrian moved closer. Then perhaps cooperation. I have a business built on knowing things other people don't. Having someone with your skills, real skills, not this waitress performance, could be quite valuable. You're asking me to work for you. I'm offering you a choice. He gestured around the room. You can go back to pretending to be nobody, serving wine to men who don't see you, waiting for whoever you're hiding from to eventually find you, because they will. Someone always does. His eyes locked on hers. Or you can stop hiding. Use what you are. Be valuable to someone powerful enough to protect you. Protection in exchange for what? My skills? My secrets? Your truth, Adrian said simply. Tell me who you really are, who trained you, why you're here, and I'll make sure no one from your past ever touches you again. It was a seductive offer, terrifying but seductive. The idea of stepping out of the shadows, of being seen for what she really was instead of this pale ghost she'd become. But Alara had learned long ago that deals with devils always had clauses written in blood. I need time to think, she said. Of course. Adrian pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. I've transferred your payment, $10,000 as promised. Consider it a down payment on future conversations. Alara's phone buzzed in her small purse, the confirmation of funds transferring. He'd actually paid her. The car will take you home, Adrian continued. But before you go, I want you to know something. What? Victor, the man you embarrassed last week, he's been making inquiries about you, about Alara Vance. He's very curious, and Victor's curiosity tends to get messy. Adrian's expression was unreadable. If you were under my protection, that would stop. Victor knows better than to touch what's mine. I'm not yours? Not yet. He smiled. But you're thinking about it. I can see it in your eyes. You're tired of hiding, tired of being small, and you're wondering what it would feel like to be dangerous again. He was right, and that terrified her more than anything else he'd said all evening. The drive home was silent, Alara's mind churning through impossible choices. By the time she reached her apartment, it was past 1 a.m. She climbed the stairs slowly, exhausted, thinking of her go-bag, and whether tonight was finally the night to use it. She was halfway down the hall when she noticed her door was ajar. Every instinct went on high alert. Alara froze, listening. No sounds from inside, no light visible through the crack. But the strand of hair she'd left was gone. Someone had been here, might still be here. She pulled the lockpick set from her bracelet, selected the thin metal rod that would work better as a weapon, and approached slowly. The door swung open at her touch, hinges silent. Her apartment was trashed, not ransacked randomly. This was methodical. Cushions sliced open, floorboards pried up, books torn apart. Someone had been looking for something specific, taking their time. Alara moved through the space carefully, checking closets, under the bed, confirming she was alone. The intruder was gone, but they'd left a message. On her bathroom mirror, written in red lipstick from her counter, last warning, leave NYC. Below it, a photograph taped to the glass. Alara herself, captured leaving the Velvet Iris 3 nights ago. Clear, close-up, professional. The kind of photo a spotter takes before a hit. Her go-bag was gone. 3 years of carefully prepared escape plans vanished. Alara stared at her reflection over the threatening message, her mind ice-cold and calculating. Someone from her old life had found her. They'd been watching, waiting, and now they were making their move. She could run, try to disappear again without her prepared resources. Hope she could stay ahead of whoever was hunting her. Or she could call the number on Adrian's business card and accept the devil's deal. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "I heard you had a visitor tonight," Adrian's voice said when she picked up. "Unfortunate. These things happen when word gets around that someone interesting is in town." "You knew," Alara said flatly. "You knew someone would come for me." "I suspected. Your performance last week drew attention. Victor's been talking, and people in my world love to talk." A pause. "But I can make it stop, Alara. All you have to do is ask." She looked at the message on her mirror, the photograph, her destroyed safe space. Thought of 3 years of running, of hiding, of being small and scared and invisible, and she made her choice. "I accept," Alara said. "Your offer. I'll work for you." "Excellent." Adrian sounded genuinely pleased. "A car is already on its way. Pack whatever you need. You'll stay here tonight, where it's safe." "How did you—" "I've had people watching your building since our dinner. For your protection, of course." That smile was audible in his voice. "See you soon, Alara. The real you this time." He hung up before she could respond. 15 minutes later, Alara walked out of her apartment for the last time, carrying only a small bag of essentials. The rest, the false identity, the manufactured life, the illusion of safety, she left behind like a shed skin. As the car drove her back through the dark toward Adrian's estate, Alara felt something shift inside her. Fear, yes, but also something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Anticipation. She was done hiding, done being invisible. Whatever came next, danger, violence, or something stranger, at least it would be real. And somewhere beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small part of her that she'd buried deep began to wake up. The part that had been trained to be lethal, the part that had burned buildings and eliminated targets and survived impossible odds, the part that was very good at being dangerous. As New York's lights faded behind her, Alara Vance closed her eyes and let the mask finally slip away. The guest room Adrian assigned her was larger than her entire apartment had been. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the dark grounds, heavy curtains drawn back to reveal moonlight on manicured lawns. The bed was king-sized with crisp white linens that probably cost more than a month of her waitress salary. A marble bathroom connected through a polished oak door. Everything pristine, expensive, and utterly impersonal, like a very luxurious cell. Alara set her bag on a chair and moved to the window, studying the grounds with tactical awareness she hadn't allowed herself in years. Security lights positioned at careful intervals. Guard rotations she could just make out. 4 men visible, which meant at least 8 total. Cameras mounted on the house corners. The iron fence beyond the lawn was decorative but functional, 10 feet high with points sharp enough to deter climbing. Getting out would be difficult, which was exactly the point. A soft knock interrupted her assessment. Mrs. Sokolov entered carrying a tray with tea and small pastries, her expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Volkov thought you might want something before bed," she said, setting the tray on a small table. "Is there anything else you require?" "No, thank you." The older woman paused at the door. "Miss Vance? If I may offer some advice?" Alara turned. "Please." "Mr. Volkov is a fair employer, but he values honesty above all else. Whatever arrangement you've made with him, keep your word. He doesn't tolerate deception from those under his protection." Her eyes held genuine warning. "But if you are honest with him, he'll move heaven and earth to keep you safe. I've worked for him for 8 years. I've never seen him break a promise. And if the promise is impossible to keep, then don't make it." Mrs. Sokolov's expression softened slightly. "Sleep well, Miss Vance. Tomorrow will be demanding." When she was gone, Alara sat on the bed and stared at her reflection in the dark window. She looked like a stranger, exhausted, uncertain, stripped of the careful mask she'd worn for 3 years. The real her, emerging like something long drowned finally surfacing. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat by the window and watched the guards rotate, memorizing patterns, calculating angles, planning escapes she probably wouldn't use, old habits refusing to die. Dawn came cold and gray. At 7, another knock announced breakfast: coffee, fruit, fresh bread. At 8, a quiet voice through the door informed her Mr. Volkov expected her in his office at 9. Alara dressed carefully, choosing clothes from her small bag that wouldn't look out of place in a criminal empire's headquarters. Dark jeans, a simple black sweater, boots with good traction. She braided her hair back, severe and practical. When she looked in the mirror this time, she saw someone closer to who she'd been before. Not the waitress, not the ghost, something sharper. Adrian's office was on the second floor, a spacious room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. Large windows offered views of the estate, positioned so anyone sitting at the desk could see approaching visitors long before they arrived. Strategic, like everything else about him. He was already there when she entered, reading something on a tablet, dressed in black slacks and a charcoal sweater that made him look younger, more accessible. The illusion shattered when he looked up and she saw those winter eyes, cold and calculating as ever. "Good morning," he said. "Coffee?" "Please." He poured from a French press on a side table, handed her a cup. The domestic gesture felt surreal given the circumstances. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "No." "Honest. Good." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "We're going to have a conversation now, Ilara. A real one. And I need you to understand something before we begin." She sat, cradling the warm cup. "What's that?" "You're safe here. Whatever you tell me, whatever truth you've been hiding, it doesn't leave this room unless you give permission. I don't share intelligence with rivals. I don't sell out my own people. And as of last night, you became one of my people." He leaned back in his chair. "So let's start with the basics. What's your real name?" Ilara studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. This was the moment. The confession that would bind her to him or destroy the fragile alliance before it began. She thought of the message on her mirror, the photograph, the stolen go bag. Thought of 3 years running and hiding and pretending to be nobody. Thought of Mrs. Sokolov's words. He values honesty above all else. "Ilara Vance is real," she said slowly. "It's the name on my birth certificate. The name my parents gave me before they died when I was 6. What's false is everything after that." Adrian set down his tablet, full attention on her now. "Continue." "I was raised by the state, foster system in Philadelphia, like my cover story says. But at 16 I was recruited, not adopted, recruited, by an organization that doesn't have a public name because it doesn't officially exist." "The Raven and Shield," Adrian said. "You know it?" "I've seen the symbol. Heard rumors. Intelligence community whispers about a shadow group that handles operations too dirty for official channels." His expression was unreadable. "Are you telling me you were a child soldier for American intelligence?" "Not American. International. We had no national loyalty. We were tools, trained to go where governments couldn't officially operate." The words came easier than she'd expected, 3 years of silence finally breaking. "They took kids from the foster system, from war zones, from anywhere children disappeared without questions, trained us, made us into weapons." "What kind of training?" "Every kind." Ilara set down her cup, her hands steady despite the memories flooding back. "Languages, combat, infiltration, explosives, interrogation. We learned to become anyone, blend anywhere, extract information or eliminate targets as needed. By the time I was 20, I'd operated in 14 countries under 16 different identities." Adrian was quiet for a moment, processing. "The Moscow incident. That was you. That was my last mission. 6 targets in a safe house, planning an attack that would have killed hundreds. My team went in to extract intelligence and neutralize the threat." She met his eyes. "We succeeded. The building burned because we needed to erase evidence. No innocent casualties. Clean operation. Except for the photograph. Except for that." Ilara's jaw tightened. Someone was watching who shouldn't have been. A satellite we didn't know about, or a drone we missed. The photo surfaced 3 months later on dark web intelligence forums. By then, the organization had already disbanded. Why? Political pressure, but budget cuts? A mission in Somalia went wrong, 12 operatives killed, media attention the organization couldn't survive. They shut down everything, burned the files, scattered us to the winds with new identities and orders to disappear. She paused. Most of us did. Some didn't make it. Someone's hunting former members, Adrian said, understanding clicking into place. That's why you're in New York pretending to be a waitress. That's why your apartment was searched. I don't know who specifically. Could be someone seeking revenge for past operations. Could be a government trying to eliminate loose ends. Could be former handlers who've decided we know too much. Alara's voice was bitter. When you train people to be ghosts, you can't be surprised when they vanish. But you also can't be surprised when something from the dark follows them. Adrian stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, thinking. How many others like you are out there? I don't know. We were compartmentalized. I knew my immediate team, 4 others, but that's all. The organization could have had 20 operatives or 200. Your team, are they still alive? The question hit harder than she'd expected. Alara's throat tightened. I don't know. We were told never to contact each other after disbandment. It was safer that way. If one was captured, they couldn't compromise the others. But you've thought about reaching out. Every day for 3 years. Adrian turned back to her, his expression thoughtful. You've given me valuable information, Alara, more than I expected. Now I'll give you something in return. He pulled out his phone, swiped through several screens, then turned it toward her. This is why Victor was so interested in you after your little performance. The screen showed a message thread, written in Russian. Alara read quickly, her blood chilling with each line. Victor had been offering money for information about a woman matching her description. Specifically, a woman with extensive language skills and possible military training, currently working in Manhattan. The bounty was $50,000 for her location, $100,000 for her delivered alive. He sent this the morning after our dinner at the Velvet Iris, Adrian said, to 6 different intelligence brokers I know of. Probably more I don't. You could have collected that bounty yourself, Alara said quietly. I could have. Adrian pocketed his phone. I didn't. Want to know why? Because you see a different kind of value in me. Partially. But also because Victor's an arrogant fool who thinks he can operate in my territory without permission. His smile was cold. And I enjoy proving arrogant fools wrong. So this is about pride. Territory. It's about power, which is always about pride and territory. Adrian moved closer, leaning against the desk edge. But it's also about opportunity. You have skills I can use, information that's valuable, and enemies who are now my enemies because I chose to protect you. That creates alignment of interests. You mean leverage? I mean partnership. He studied her carefully. I told you last night I value honesty. Here's mine. I'm building something larger than my father's operation, not just criminal enterprise. That's crude. Unsustainable. I'm creating a network that spans legitimate and illegitimate business, with enough power to operate above the law without breaking it, obviously. For that, I need exceptional people. You want me to work for you, actually work for you. I want you to be yourself instead of hiding. Use your training, your skills, your knowledge. Adrian's voice took on intensity. You've spent 3 years serving wine to people who didn't see you. I'm offering you a chance to matter again. To be dangerous again, to be everything you were trained to be, but for someone who'll appreciate it. Alara stood, needing distance to think. She walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where guards patrolled and cameras watched. And if I say no? Then you can leave. I won't stop you. But you'll be alone again, running from people who want you dead, without resources or protection. He paused. Victor's bounty is just the beginning. Once word spreads that Alara Vance is someone interesting, others will come looking. Can you survive that alone? The honest answer was maybe. She'd been trained to survive impossible odds. But 3 years of rust, 3 years of soft living, had dulled edges that used to be razor sharp, and fighting alone against unknown enemies with unlimited resources was a losing proposition. What would you want me to do? She asked, still facing the window. For now? Stay here. Recover your skills. Let me handle Victor and his bounty. She heard Adrian move closer behind her. Then we'll see what develops. I have operations that need someone with your particular expertise, negotiations where your languages would be invaluable, security assessments that require your tactical mind. You want a personal operative. I want someone I can trust who's as dangerous as she is smart. His reflection appeared in the window beside hers. And I think you want to stop hiding, stop being small, stop apologizing for being exactly what you were made to be. He was right, and Alara hated how easily he'd read her. But she also felt something stirring that she'd thought long dead. Ambition, purpose, the desire to be more than a ghost serving wine to men who didn't matter. I need guarantees, she said, turning to face him. Real ones. Not just your word. Name them. First, my identity stays protected. Whatever work I do for you, it doesn't connect back to Alara Vance or my real past. If I burn alone. Agreed. Second, I want access to your intelligence network. I need to know who's hunting people like me and why. If I'm going to survive, I need information. Adrian considered this. Access, yes, but not full access. Some information is compartmentalized for good reason. Then partial access, enough to track threats. Acceptable. Third, Alara locked eyes with him. If I find out you're lying to me, if this protection is a trap or you're planning to sell me out, our deal ends, violently. For the first time, Adrian's smile seemed genuine, almost amused. Threatening me already. I like it. He extended his hand. Agreed. You have my word, and unlike most people in this world, my word actually means something. Alara stared at his offered hand. This was the moment. Once she shook, she was committed. No more running, no more hiding. She'd be stepping back into the world she'd tried so hard to escape. But the alternative was staying in the shadows forever, waiting for enemies to find her, dying alone and unmourned in some forgotten corner. At least this way she'd die fighting. She took his hand. His grip was firm, confident, the handshake of someone sealing a deal he expected to honor. Welcome to the organization, Alara, Adrian said. Let's see what you're really capable of. The next week passed in a blur of activity that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Adrian's estate became a training ground where Alara slowly shed 3 years of accumulated rust. Mornings started at 5 with physical conditioning, running the estate grounds, circuit training in the private gym, sparring sessions with Adrian's security team. The guards were professional, well-trained, but none had the specialized combat experience Alara possessed. Within 3 days, she was winning most matches. Within 5, the guards stopped pulling their punches out of courtesy. Where did you learn that move? One guard, a former Marine named Davies, asked after she'd put him on the mat for the 3rd time. That's not standard military. It's not standard anything, Alara said, helping him up. Which is the point. Afternoons were spent in Adrian's office, reviewing intelligence reports and organizational structures. She learned the architecture of his empire, the legitimate businesses that provided cover, the illegal operations that provided profit, the careful balance between the two. Shipping companies in Brooklyn, real estate holdings in Queens, import/export firms that occasionally imported things customs would frown upon. My father built this through fear, Adrian explained one afternoon, showing her a network diagram on his tablet. Brutality, intimidation, old-school methods. It worked for his generation, but it's unsustainable now. Too much attention, too many enemies. I'm rebuilding based on information and leverage instead. Blackmail, Alara said. Intelligence, he corrected. Knowing things about people that they'd prefer stayed hidden. Offering solutions to their problems that create mutual obligation. He smiled slightly. Much cleaner than violence, though violence remains an option when necessary. Evenings varied. Sometimes Adrian hosted dinners where Alara translated and observed, learning the players in his world. Sometimes they worked through scenarios, theoretical problems requiring tactical solutions. Sometimes he simply asked her questions about her past, her training, her experiences. She answered carefully, sharing enough to satisfy his curiosity without revealing everything. Some memories were too dark, too brutal, too personal to speak aloud. He seemed to understand this, never pushing past her boundaries. On the 8th night, he surprised her. Tomorrow, you're coming with me to Brooklyn, he said over dinner in the estate's formal dining room. There's a situation that needs handling. I want you there. Alara set down her fork. What kind of situation? Victor's situation. Adrian's expression hardened. He's been causing problems since our dinner at the Velvet Iris. Spreading rumors, making moves in territory he knows is mine, generally being an annoyance. Time to remind him of boundaries. You want me there as what? Translator? Bodyguard? As a message. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Victor thinks you're a weakness he can exploit. Some woman I'm protecting out of sentiment or attraction. I want him to see what you actually are. Which is what? Dangerous enough that he should have kept his mouth shut. The next morning, they left the estate in a convoy, 2 black SUVs with tinted windows, Adrian and Alara in the lead vehicle with 2 guards. The drive into Brooklyn took 40 minutes, tension building with each passing mile. They were heading to a warehouse in Red Hook, neutral territory where disputes were traditionally settled. Victor would be there with his own people. The meeting was ostensibly about territorial boundaries, but everyone knew it was about power and respect. Remember, Adrian said as they approached, you're not here to start violence. You're here to prevent it by making Victor understand that pressing this issue will be very costly. Understood. If things do go wrong, I know what to do if things go wrong. He glanced at her, something approving in his expression. I believe you do. The warehouse was exactly what Alara expected. Cavernous, mostly empty, with excellent acoustics for making dramatic points. Victor was already there with 6 men, all armed, all watching the entrance with predatory attention. Adrian entered first, Alara slightly behind and to his left, close enough to protect, positioned to watch his blind spots. The 2 guards stayed by the door. Adrian, Victor said, his voice echoing in the space. Punctual as always. And you brought your pet translator. How thoughtful. Alara felt Adrian tense beside her, but his voice remained calm. Victor, I believe we have matters to discuss. We do indeed, Victor gestured broadly. You see, I've been reconsidering our arrangement regarding the Queen's territory. I think my initial concession was too generous. We had an agreement. Agreements change when circumstances change. Victor's eyes shifted to Alara, contempt clear in his expression. For instance, when a man starts making decisions based on protecting strays rather than maintaining strength. Careful, Adrian said quietly. Or what? You'll have your waitress defend your honor? Victor laughed, his men joining in. Please, Adrian, we both know she's just... He didn't finish the sentence because Alara moved. 3 steps closed the distance. Her hand caught Victor's wrist as he gestured, twisting it at an angle that made his fingers spasm and drop the gun he'd been slowly reaching for. Before his guards could react, she had him in a lock, his arm bent behind his back, her other hand on his throat. She's just what? Alara asked in Russian, her voice conversational despite the violence of her position. I'm curious what you were going to say. The warehouse erupted in motion, Victor's men drawing weapons, Adrian's guards responding, everyone suddenly pointing guns at everyone else. Alara, Adrian said calmly, let him go. She released Victor and stepped back, hands visible, non-threatening. But the message had been delivered. Victor stumbled forward, rubbing his wrist, his face red with humiliation and rage. You trained attack dog bites, he spat. Congratulations, Adrian. Very impressive. No, Adrian corrected. What's impressive is that she could have killed you in the time it took you to blink and chose not to. That's discipline, Victor. That's control. Something you clearly lack. Victor's hand moved toward his jacket again. Alara saw it, recognized the motion, assessed the threat, but Adrian raised his voice. I came here to renegotiate in good faith, Victor, to remind you that our agreement benefits us both. But if you want to make this about dominance displays and threats, then let's be clear about the hierarchy. He took a step forward. You operate in my city at my discretion. You breathe in my territory because I allow it. And if you continue spreading bounties on people under my protection, continue making moves without permission, I will remove you. Permanently. You're making threats over a woman? Victor's laugh was bitter. Your father would be ashamed. My father was a brutal tyrant who died alone with more enemies than allies. I'm building something smarter. Adrian's voice dropped dangerously. Now, Are we going to resolve this like civilized people, or do you want to see exactly what my pet translator can actually do? Silence stretched. Victor's men looked to him for guidance. Ilara remained perfectly still, coiled tension waiting to explode if needed. Adrian stood like a man who'd already won and was simply waiting for everyone else to acknowledge it. Finally, Victor spat on the warehouse floor. Fine, the agreement stands, for now. Excellent choice. Adrian turned toward the exit, then paused. Oh, and Victor, cancel the bounty. If I hear you've been asking about Ilara Vance again, we'll have another meeting, one significantly less diplomatic. They left the warehouse in tense silence. It wasn't until they were in the SUV, pulling away from Red Hook, that Adrian spoke. That was reckless. That was necessary, Ilara countered. He was reaching for a weapon. I disarmed a threat. You made a point. There's a difference. The point needed making. Adrian was quiet for a moment, then surprised her by laughing. You're right. It did. You should have seen his face. He shook his head. Still, try to consult me before breaking arms in future negotiations. I didn't break it. I could have. I know. That's what made it effective. They drove in companionable silence for a while. Ilara felt adrenaline fading, replaced by something like satisfaction. For the first time in 3 years, she'd used her skills for something real. Stopped hiding what she was. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. You handled that well, Adrian said eventually. Better than I expected. You expected me to freeze? I expected you to be rusty. You weren't. He glanced at her. How does it feel, being dangerous again? Ilara considered the question honestly. Like coming home to a house that burned down. Familiar, but wrong somehow. Give it time. The wrongness fades. Does it? She looked at him directly. You've spent years building this empire, using violence when necessary, but preferring other methods. Does it still feel wrong, or have you made peace with what you are? Adrian's expression grew distant. I stopped thinking in terms of right and wrong a long time ago. Now I think in terms of effective and ineffective, sustainable and destructive, strong and weak. He paused. The moral questions are luxuries for people with different lives. That's a convenient philosophy. It's a survival philosophy, which, given your history, I'd think you'd understand. He was right, though Ilara didn't want to admit it. She'd been trained to operate beyond conventional morality, to make decisions based on strategic necessity rather than ethical consideration. The fact that she'd hidden for 3 years didn't erase what she'd done before. They were almost back to the estate when Adrian's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression darkening. When? Pause. How many? Another pause. Lock it down. We're 15 minutes out. He hung up and leaned forward to the driver. Faster. What's wrong? Ilara asked. The estate. Someone tried to breach the perimeter 20 minutes ago. Security repelled them, but... He stopped, jaw clenched. But what? One of my guards is dead. Another critically injured. His eyes met hers, cold fury visible beneath the control. Someone just declared war, and I think I know who. The estate was chaos when they arrived. Emergency vehicles, security personnel everywhere. Mrs. Sokolov coordinating responses with the calm efficiency of a battlefield general. Adrian was out of the SUV before it fully stopped, Ilara right behind him. Report, he said to his head of security, a scarred man named Gregor. 3 attackers, professional, breached the east fence with cutting equipment, neutralized cameras on that quadrant. They made it as far as the garden before our patrol engaged. Gregor's voice was grim. Thomas is dead, single gunshot, sniper precision. Rodriguez might not make it. Took 2 rounds center mass. The attackers? 2 dead. 1 escaped, wounded. We're searching the grounds. Show me. Ilara followed as Gregor led them to the east garden where the attack had occurred. 2 bodies lay covered with tarps. The 3rd location, where the attacker had escaped, showed a blood trail leading toward the fence. Adrian knelt beside one of the covered bodies, pulled back the tarp. The face revealed was young, professional, unmistakably Eastern European. I don't recognize him. Neither do I, Gregor said. No identification. military-grade weapons and equipment. This wasn't amateur. Alara crouched beside the second body, studying details. Look at the boots. Tactical, but worn. And the watch. Russian military issue from 6 years ago. She pointed to a barely visible tattoo on the man's wrist. That's a unit designation. Spetsnaz, probably former. Everyone turned to stare at her. How do you know that? Gregor asked. Because I've seen it before. Alara stood, her mind working rapidly. These aren't Victor's men. This is military-trained personnel, probably contractors. Someone hired professionals. Adrian's expression was granite. To kill me or kidnap you? Both, maybe? Or just to send a message that you're vulnerable? They succeeded in that. Adrian stood, his voice taking on a command tone Alara hadn't heard before. Gregor, full lockdown. No one in or out without my personal authorization. Double the guard rotations. I want every inch of this property under surveillance. Yes, sir. And find me that third attacker, alive if possible. I have questions. As Gregor moved to implement orders, Adrian turned to Alara. Inside. Now. They returned to his office, the door closing with a heavy thunk that felt ominously final. Adrian poured whiskey, downed it in one swallow, then poured another. This is my fault, he said. How? Victor's bounty brought attention. Then our little display at the warehouse made you an even bigger target. Someone decided you were valuable enough to risk attacking my home. He slammed the glass down. I've put you in more danger than you were in alone. Or you forced them to show their hand sooner. Alara moved to the window, looking out at the security team swarming the grounds. If they'd waited, found me in the city without protection, I'd be dead or captured. At least this way we know someone's actively hunting. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. It's strategic assessment. She turned back to him. The question is who hired Spetsnaz contractors to assault your estate. That takes serious resources and even more serious connections. Adrian was quiet, thinking. There are 3 organizations I know of with that capability and potential motive. The Sokolov Bratva has been trying to expand into my territory for years. The Chinese triads in Chinatown would benefit from my destabilization. Or... He stopped. Or what? Or it's not about my organization at all. It's about you. He met her eyes. What if your old employers didn't actually disband? What if they're eliminating loose ends? The possibility hit Alara like cold water. She'd assumed the organization had genuinely dissolved, scattered its operatives to protect them, and itself. But Adrian was right. That had been an assumption, not verified fact. If that's true, she said slowly, then every former operative is in danger. They'll be hunting us systematically. Can you contact your old team? Warn them? I was told never to make contact, that it was too dangerous. That was 3 years ago. Circumstances have changed. Adrian moved closer. If someone's actively hunting former members of your organization, they might have already found some. You need to know who's still alive, who might be coming for you, what you're actually facing. Alara's mind raced through possibilities and risks. Contact could compromise her team further, but silence could mean walking blind into a trap. I need a secure computer, she said, encrypted, anonymized, and time. You have both. An hour later, Alara sat in a windowless room in the estate's basement, Adrian's personal security center, outfitted with technology that would make intelligence agencies jealous. He'd left her alone after showing her the systems, trusting her with access that revealed much about his organization. She appreciated the trust. It made betrayal harder. Alara's fingers moved across the keyboard, muscle memory from years of training returning. She accessed the dark web through 7 layers of encryption, navigating to a form that shouldn't exist. A digital dead drop used by her old team for emergencies. The last post was 3 months old, a coded message she recognized immediately. Dmitri, her former teammate, marking himself still alive. She composed carefully. Sparrow checking in. Situation critical. Need confirmation of status. Sparrow had been her operational call sign. If anyone from her team was monitoring, they'd recognize it. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then, Hawk responding, Sparrow, you broke protocol. Why? Hawk was Elena, their team's sniper. Relief flooded through Alara. At least 2 were still alive. She typed rapidly. Under attack, professional contractors. Possible organizational cleanup. Need to know who else survived. Longer pause this time. Then, Wolf and Raven confirmed KYA last year. Bear went dark 4 months ago. Just you, me, Dimitri. 3 out of 7. The mathematics of survival were brutal. Meet necessary. Location TBD. Confirm? Another pause. Dangerous. Could be trap. Everything's dangerous. We were trained for this. The response took a full minute. Agreed. 48 hours. You set location. Hawk out. Alara closed the chat and covered her tracks, erasing any evidence of the conversation. Then she sat in the dark room, processing the reality. 4 teammates dead or missing. Only 3 survivors scattered across different cities, all hiding, all vulnerable. And someone was hunting them with professional killers and unlimited resources. She found Adrian in his office, reviewing security footage from the attack. He looked up when she entered. Well? I made contact. 2 former teammates are alive and willing to meet. 4 others are dead or missing. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Where do you want to meet them? Neutral ground. Public enough to prevent ambushes, private enough to talk freely. She considered. There's a park in Brooklyn. No, absolutely not. You're not leaving this estate until we know exactly who attacked us and why. Adrian, this isn't negotiable, Alara. Someone just sent military contractors to my home. Until I know who and neutralize the threat, you stay here where I can protect you. I don't need protection. I need answers. You need both. He stood, moving around the desk. And more importantly, I need you alive. Not just because you're valuable, but because I gave you my word. I don't break my word. The intensity in his voice surprised her. This wasn't just strategic calculation. There was something personal beneath it. Then bring them here, Alara said after a moment. My teammates. Invite them to the estate. We control the environment. You maintain security. Everyone gets what they need. Adrian considered this. You trust them? With my life. We operated together for years. That was years ago. People change, especially when they're scared. They won't betray me. You can't know that. I know that better than I know anything else. Alara met his eyes. These people are all I have left from that life. If they say they'll meet honestly. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. Set it up. But they come alone. They submit to security screening, and they leave their weapons at the gate. Agreed. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Alara? Yes? After tonight, after seeing what they sent for you, I'm beginning to understand exactly how dangerous you must have been, how dangerous you still are. He paused. I'm also beginning to understand why someone might want you eliminated badly enough to risk attacking me. Is that a problem? No. His smile was sharp. It's fascinating. 2 days later, Elena arrived first. Alara watched from the security monitors as the black sedan passed through the estate gates, submitting to the thorough screening process Adrian's team had implemented: metal detectors, vehicle inspection, background verification. Elena endured it all with the patience of someone who understood security protocols intimately. When she finally stepped out of the car in the circular driveway, Alara felt 3 years of separation compress into a single sharp moment of recognition. Elena looked different, harder, thinner, her blonde hair cut shorter than the shoulder-length style she'd worn during operations. But the way she moved was unmistakable, that fluid economy of motion that marked someone trained to kill efficiently. Alara met her at the door, personally, Adrian flanking her with 2 guards maintaining discreet distance. For a moment, the 2 women simply stared at each other across the threshold. Then Elena smiled, something genuine breaking through the hardened exterior. Sparrow, she said in Russian, you look good for a dead woman. You're one to talk, Hawk. Alara stepped forward and embraced her former teammate, feeling the tension in Elena's frame, the coiled readiness that never quite left people like them. Come inside, we have much to discuss. They settled in one of the estate's sitting rooms, neutral territory that felt less like an interrogation than Adrian's office would have. Elena accepted tea from Mrs. Sokolov with polite thanks, her eyes constantly scanning the room, cataloging exits and threats with professional thoroughness. So this is where you've been hiding, Elena said, switching to English. Her accent was minimal, years of training smoothing away most traces of her Ukrainian origins. Working for organized crime, that's quite a career pivot. Says the woman who showed up in a car with diplomat plates, Ilara countered. Elena's smile was thin. Touché. We've all found our own ways to survive. She glanced at Adrian, who stood near the window observing. Is he staying for this conversation? He knows everything relevant, Ilara said, and considering someone just attacked his home trying to get to me, he has a stake in whatever we discuss. Fair enough. Elena set down her teacup and leaned back, the movement casual, but her posture still alert. You said we were under attack. Tell me everything. Ilara walked her through the timeline. The recognition at the Velvet Iris, Victor's bounty, the assault on the estate, the dead guards. Elena listened without interruption, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. Spetsnaz contractors, she said when Ilara finished. That's expensive, professional. Someone with serious resources wants you badly. Not just me. You said Wolf and Raven are dead. Bear's missing. That's too many coincidences. I know. Elena's jaw tightened. Wolf died 8 months ago in Berlin. Car accident that wasn't an accident. Brake lines cut. Professional job. Raven went down in Singapore 6 months later. Mugging gone wrong, except the mugger used a suppressed weapon and knew exactly where to find her. She paused. Bear sent me a message 4 months ago saying he'd spotted surveillance. Then nothing. His apartment in Prague was cleaned out completely, like he'd never existed. Adrian spoke from the window. That's systematic elimination. Someone's working down a list. Which raises the question, Elena said, turning her sharp gaze on him. Why are you helping Ilara? What's your angle in this? She works for me now. I protect my people. Criminals don't do anything without profit motive. What do you get out of protecting a former intelligence operative? Someone who can translate rare dialects, assess security vulnerabilities, and apparently make excellent strategic decisions under pressure. Adrian's smile was cold. Plus, I enjoy irritating people who think they can operate in my territory without consequences. Elena studied him for a long moment, then looked at Ilara. You trust him? As much as I trust anyone. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's honest, which is more valuable. Before Elena could respond, Gregor appeared in the doorway. Mr. Volkov, the second guest has arrived. Dmitri's arrival was more dramatic than Elena's. He emerged from the security screening looking annoyed, his dark hair disheveled, his jacket wrinkled. Where Elena had adapted to civilian life with polished professionalism, Dmitri still carried the rough edges of their operational days. This is ridiculous, he said in accented English as he entered the sitting room. Metal detectors, explosive residue tests, background verification. I feel like I'm entering a military installation. You basically are, Adrian said mildly. Dmitri's eyes locked on Ilara and his expression softened. Sparrow, 3 years and you look exactly the same. Liar, I look older. We all do. He moved to embrace her, and Ilara caught the slight wince as he moved his left arm. An old injury, probably from their last mission together. But it's good to see you breathing. They settled into chairs, the 3 former teammates forming a rough triangle with Adrian observing from his position by the window. For a moment no one spoke, the weight of 3 years and 4 dead colleagues hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Dmitri broke the silence. So, we're being hunted. Any theories on who? Several, Elena said. None of them good. Could be a government cleaning up loose ends. Could be someone seeking revenge for past operations. Could be a private contractor hired by any number of people we pissed off over the years. Or it could be the organization itself, Ilara said quietly. Both her former teammates turned to stare at her. Explain, Elena said. Think about it. We were told the organization disbanded, that we were being scattered for our own protection. But what if that was a lie? What if they're eliminating operatives systematically to prevent anyone from exposing what we did? Dmitri's face darkened. That would mean Handler lied to us. Handler had been their controller, the voice on encrypted communications, who directed missions and provided intelligence. They'd never met him in person, operational security, but his word had been law for 7 years. Handler could be dead too, Elena pointed out, or following orders from someone higher up the chain. Either way, someone knows where to find us. Alara leaned forward. The question is how? We were compartmentalized. Different identities, different cities, no contact protocol. How is someone tracking us down? The room fell silent as they considered possibilities. Adrian moved from the window to pour himself a drink, then surprised everyone by speaking. "You're thinking about this wrong," he said. "You're assuming someone tracked you individually. What if they didn't? What if they found one person and made them talk?" The implications hit like a physical blow. Alara saw it reflected in her teammates' faces, the horrible possibility that one of their own had been compromised and given up the others. "No," Dmitri said firmly. "We were trained to resist interrogation. None of us would break." "Everyone breaks eventually," Adrian said, not unkindly. "The question is whether they had time before you died. And if you died knowing you'd condemned your team, what would that do to someone?" "It would destroy them," Elena said quietly. "Which means if someone did break, they might have killed themselves after, making it look like an accident or attack to preserve whatever dignity remained." The silence that followed was oppressive. Alara thought of Wolf's car accident, Raven's mugging. Had they been attacks or suicides staged to look like murders? Was there a difference if the end result was the same? "This is speculation," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "We don't know anything for certain. What we do know is that 4 of our team are gone and 3 of us are still alive. We need to figure out why and how to stay that way." "Agreed," Elena said. "Which brings us back to the original question. Who has the resources and motivation to hunt down former intelligence operatives?" "I may have information relevant to that," Adrian said. He pulled out his phone, swiped through several screens, then turned it to show a photograph. "Recognize this man?" The image showed a silver-haired man in an expensive suit photographed at what looked like a diplomatic reception. He was smiling, shaking hands with someone out of frame, the picture of respectability. Elena's face went white. "That's Volkov, Konstantin Volkov." "My uncle," Adrian said, "my father's younger brother, currently serving as a deputy minister in the Russian government with connections to intelligence services." Alara's mind raced, connecting dots. "You think your uncle is behind this?" "I think my uncle has been trying to destroy my organization for years. Claims I'm an embarrassment to the family name. That criminal enterprise reflects poorly on his political career." Adrian's voice was bitter. "He's made several attempts to undermine me. All failed, but he's persistent." "What does that have to do with us?" Dmitri asked. "Because 2 weeks ago, I intercepted intelligence suggesting Konstantin was hiring contractors for an operation in the United States. No details on the target, but the budget was substantial. Then Alara appears in my restaurant speaking rare languages and demonstrating skills that don't match her cover story. Then my home gets attacked by Russian contractors." He looked at each of them in turn. "I don't believe in coincidences." Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You're saying a Russian deputy minister with intelligence connections is systematically eliminating former operatives from a disbanded shadow organization. Why? What's his motivation?" "Maybe you killed someone he cared about," Adrian suggested, "or compromised an operation he was involved in, or simply know something he can't afford to have surface." Alara's memory churned through past missions, trying to identify anything that might connect to Konstantin Volkov. Moscow incident, Berlin extraction, the Singapore operation, 7 years of classified missions blurring together. Then it clicked. "Tbilisi," she said quietly. 5 years ago. We extracted a defector from Georgian intelligence who claimed to have information on Russian corruption at the highest levels. The defector died before he could testify, poisoned in protective custody. She looked at her teammates. "Remember? We always suspected someone in the chain was compromised." Elena's eyes widened. The defector's information was about weapons deals, illegal sales of Russian military equipment to sanctioned countries, with profits going to specific government officials. "Officials who would kill to keep that quiet," Dmitri finished. Adrian was already working his phone. "Give me names. Anyone connected to that operation. Anyone who might have been mentioned in the defector's information." They spent the next hour reconstructing what they remembered of the Tbilisi mission. Details had faded with time, but the broad strokes remained clear. The defector had named 3 specific Russian officials involved in the weapons scheme: One was now dead, heart attack 2 years ago. The second had been forced into retirement amid vague corruption allegations. The third was Konstantin Volkov. That's motive, Elena said. If we were the team that extracted the defector, if there's any chance we saw his full testimony before he was killed, we're loose ends. Loose ends he's been systematically cutting, Ilara added. Adrian set down his phone, his expression grim. There's another problem. If Konstantin is behind this, he has access to Russian intelligence resources. That means surveillance capabilities, contractor networks, and enough political cover to operate with impunity. So how do we fight back? Dmitry demanded. We can't just hide forever hoping he gives up. No, Adrian agreed. You need to become too expensive to kill. Make it clear that eliminating you would cost more than the risk of leaving you alive. How? Elena asked. Insurance, documentation, evidence that if anything happens to you, certain information gets released automatically. He looked at Ilara. Did you keep any records from the Tbilisi mission? Anything that could prove Volkov's involvement in the weapons deals? We were ordered to destroy everything after the defector died. Standard protocol. But you didn't, Adrian said, reading her expression. You kept something. Ilara hesitated, old training warring with current necessity. Keeping mission records was a violation of protocol, punishable by immediate termination. But she'd been young, idealistic, convinced that someday the truth might matter. I kept a copy of the defector's initial deposition, she admitted. Encrypted, hidden in multiple locations. I never accessed it after we disbanded. Can you access it now? If the encryption keys still work, if the storage sites haven't been compromised. She looked at her teammates. Did either of you keep anything? Elena shook her head, but Dimitri's expression was conflicted. I kept photographs, documents we recovered from the Georgian safe house where we found the defector. I thought they might be useful leverage someday. They are, Adrian said. Today. Now. Where are they? Safety deposit box in Zurich, accessed by codes I haven't used in years. Can you retrieve them? In theory, but traveling internationally while being actively hunted seems like suicide. Not if you're traveling with protection. Adrian pulled out his phone again. I have resources across Europe. Security teams, safe houses, transportation. You get to Zurich, retrieve the documents, and get back here. We compile everything, create multiple dead man switches, and then we negotiate with Konstantin from a position of strength. Negotiate? Elena's voice dripped skepticism. You want us to negotiate with the man trying to kill us? I want you to make it clear that killing you creates more problems than it solves. That's how you survive in this world. Not by hiding, but by making yourself more valuable alive than dead. Adrian's gaze was intense. It's how I've survived my uncle's attempts to destroy me. It's how you'll survive his attempts to eliminate you. Ilara looked at her former teammates, reading the calculation in their eyes. This was the decision point. They could scatter again, return to their separate hiding places and hope to outlast the threat. Or they could fight back, take the risk of gathering evidence and forcing a confrontation. I'm in, she said. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. If there's a chance to end this, I want to take it. You're trusting a criminal you've known for 2 weeks to protect you from a government minister with unlimited resources, Elena pointed out. That's insane. I'm trusting someone who's already protected me when he didn't have to. Who's given me more honesty than the organization that trained me ever did? Ilara met Adrian's eyes. And I'm trusting my own judgment about people, which has kept me alive this long. Dmitry laughed, sharp and bitter. Well, when you put it that way, I'm in too. Better to die fighting than hiding in a hole waiting for them to find me. All eyes turned to Elena. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the estate grounds where guards patrolled and cameras watched. Fine, she said finally, but I want details, operational plans, security protocols, extraction contingencies. We do this properly or we don't do it at all. Agreed, Adrian said. We'll spend the next few days planning. Dmitry, you'll travel to Zurich with a full security team. Elena, I need you to make contact with any remaining intelligence sources you might have. Find out if there's chatter about Konstantin's operations. Ilara, you'll work with me to compile what we know and create the documentation package. And then? Dmitry asked. Then we send Konstantin a message he can't ignore. We let him know that we have evidence of his crimes, that it's distributed and protected, and that the only way it stays buried is if he calls off the hunt. Adrian's smile was sharp. We turned the tables. Make him the one looking over his shoulder. The plan was audacious, risky, and probably doomed to fail. But as Alara looked at her teammates, survivors of impossible odds, trained to operate in shadows, marked for death but still breathing, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in operational planning. Adrian's resources proved extensive. He had security teams in 6 countries, transportation networks that could move people and materials invisibly, and connections that reached into surprising corners of international business and government. Dmitri left for Zurich on the second day, flanked by 4 of Adrian's best security personnel. The team included a former Mossad operative, an ex-SAS soldier, and 2 specialists in urban extraction. Overkill, perhaps, but given the stakes, appropriate. Elena worked from the estate's secure communications center, reaching out through encrypted channels to former contacts in intelligence communities. She was cautious, revealing nothing about their situation while fishing for information about Konstantin's activities. By the 3rd day, she'd confirmed that Konstantin had indeed hired a contractor team recently, the same team that had attacked the estate. They're called Obsidian Group, she reported during a briefing in Adrian's office. Former special forces from various countries operating as private military contractors. Very expensive, very professional, very lethal. Konstantin hired them 6 months ago for an unspecified operation in North America. 6 months, Alara said. That's when the first of our team died. Exactly, which means he's been planning this systematically. Obsidian didn't just attack random targets. They were given a list and worked through it methodically. Adrian was at his desk, reviewing financial records on multiple screens. Obsidian Group operates through shell companies in Cyprus and the Cayman Islands. They're good at covering their tracks, but money always leaves a trail. I've traced 3 payments from accounts linked to Konstantin totaling 2 million euros over the past 6 months. That's a lot of money to kill 5 people, Elena observed. It's not just about killing, Alara said, understanding clicking into place. It's about making sure the deaths look unrelated. Car accidents, muggings, disappearances. Each one requires research, planning, execution without leaving evidence. That kind of precision costs. And suggests Konstantin is very serious about making sure none of you talk. Adrian pulled up another screen. Which brings me to interesting development number 2. My sources indicate Konstantin is scheduled to attend a private security conference in Vienna next month. Very exclusive, lots of defense contractors and government officials. Perfect venue for discussing sensitive business. You think he'll be meeting with Obsidian there, Sis? Alara asked. I think it's likely. Which means we have a timeline, 4 weeks to gather evidence, create our insurance package, and make contact before he can authorize another wave of attacks. Elena frowned. 4 weeks isn't much time. We still need Dmitri to return with the documents. We need to access Alara's encrypted files, and we need to verify everything is legitimate enough to actually threaten him. Then we better work efficiently. Adrian stood. Alara, let's start with your encryption keys. Can you access them from here? She'd been dreading this conversation. The encryption system she'd used 5 years ago was multi-layered, requiring physical access to specific locations where she'd hidden key fragments. One in Philadelphia, buried in a public park. One in Boston, concealed in a library book. One in Montreal, left in a safety deposit box. I need to travel, she said. 3 cities, 3 key fragments. Without all 3, the encryption is unbreakable. Absolutely not, Adrian said immediately. You're not leaving this estate while Obsidian is actively hunting you. Then we can't access the files. There has to be another way. There isn't. I designed it that way specifically. No remote access, no digital footprint. The only way to decrypt those files is to physically gather the keys. Alara met his gaze steadily. Which means I need to travel. The argument that followed was intense. Adrian insisted it was too dangerous. Alara countered that without the evidence, they had no leverage. Elena suggested sending someone else to retrieve the keys. Alara explained the retrieval process required personal verification, fingerprints, biometric data, information only she possessed. Finally, Adrian relented with conditions. You don't travel alone. You take a full security team. You move fast, in and out of each city within hours. You maintain constant communication, and at the first sign of trouble, you abort and return here immediately. Agreed. I mean it, Alara. This isn't a suggestion. If my team says it's too dangerous, you listen to them. I understand. He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. You better, because I don't want to explain to your teammates why I let you get killed. The journey began the next morning. Alara traveled in an armored SUV with 4 guards. Davies, the former Marine she'd sparred with, a woman named Katya, who specialized in counter-surveillance, and 2 others whose military backgrounds were evident in every controlled movement. They drove to Philadelphia first, arriving mid-morning. The park where she'd buried the first key fragment looked different after 5 years. New playground equipment, repaved paths, more security cameras than she remembered. Alara directed the team to the northeast corner, near a cluster of oak trees that had grown taller but remained recognizable. It's buried 3 feet down, 20 paces from the largest tree, marked with a flat stone, she said. Davies produced a small folding shovel while Katia established a perimeter, watching for surveillance or threats. The digging took 15 minutes, nerve-wracking minutes, where Alara felt exposed despite the team's protection. Then Davies' shovel hit something solid. The container was a waterproof tube, unmarked and anonymous. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a USB drive no larger than her thumb. Alara pocketed it without examining the contents. Verification would come later in secure environment. 1 down, she said. 2 to go. Boston was next. The library where she'd hidden the second key fragment was a beautiful old building in Back Bay, all marble columns and vaulted ceilings. Alara had chosen a specific book, a first edition of Moby Dick, valuable enough to be kept in climate-controlled special collections but obscure enough not to be frequently accessed. The librarian on duty was new, didn't recognize Alara, which was good. She submitted the request form for the book, was directed to a private reading room, and waited with barely controlled tension as the volume was retrieved. When it arrived, she opened it carefully, found the hollowed section she'd carved years ago, and retrieved the second USB drive. The whole process took 20 minutes. Clean, simple, no complications. Too simple. As they were leaving the library, Katya's hand went to her earpiece. Her expression tightened. "We have a tail," she said quietly. "Gray sedan, 2 occupants, been following since we left the library. Could be coincidence." "In this business, there are no coincidences," Davies said. He keyed his radio. "Alpha team, confirm visual on gray sedan." The response crackled back immediately. "Confirmed. Sedan is maintaining follow position. Second vehicle, black SUV, just joined from Parallel Street." Alara's pulse quickened. "How many total?" "Minimum 4 hostiles, possibly more." "Options?" "We can attempt evasion or engage." "Evade," Alara said immediately. "We have what we came for, no need to escalate." What followed was a high-speed chase through Boston traffic that would have been cinematic if it weren't terrifying. Their driver, a woman named Chen, who apparently had training in tactical vehicle operations, weaved through streets with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of the city layout. The pursuing vehicles kept pace for 10 minutes before Katya made a call. "Alpha team, we need interference, Haymarket area, converging on our position." "Copy that, deploying now." 2 blocks later, another SUV swept in from a side street, positioning itself between their vehicle and the pursuers. The resulting traffic chaos bought them precious seconds. Chen took advantage, turning sharply into an underground parking garage, killing the lights, and sliding into a maintenance bay behind a concrete pillar. They waited in tense silence. Engine cooling, breathing controlled, hands near weapons. Alara could hear her heartbeat in her ears, old training keeping her calm despite the adrenaline. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally, Katya's radio crackled. "Pursuers have moved on. Sector appears clear." They waited another 15 minutes before emerging from the garage through a different exit, taking a circuitous route out of Boston. By the time they were back on the highway heading toward Montreal, Alara's hands had stopped shaking. "That was too close," Davies said. "They were waiting for us. Knew we'd be at that library." "How?" Alara asked. "No one knew about the key locations except me." "Maybe they're monitoring all your old haunts. Maybe they got lucky. Either way, Montreal just became much more dangerous." He was right. The third key fragment was in a safety deposit box at a bank in Montreal's financial district. Much more controlled environment, which could be good or bad depending on whether Obsidian had the same idea. Alara pulled out her phone and called Adrian. He answered on the first ring. "We had contact in Boston," she said without preamble. "Pursuit team, professional. We evaded, but they knew we were there." Adrian's curse was creative and multilingual. "Return to the estate. Abort the Montreal run." "We can't. I need all 3 keys." "Not if you're dead." "If I return without the 3rd key, we have nothing. No leverage, no insurance, no way to stop Constantine." Alara kept her voice steady. "We're already halfway to Montreal. Let us finish this." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Alara thought he might have hung up. Then, "Fine, but we're changing the approach. Don't go to the bank. Too exposed, too controlled. I'll have people retrieve the box contents and bring them to you at a secure location." "The box requires my biometric signature to open." "Then we'll have someone authorized to override it. Give me the bank name and box number. I'll handle the rest." It was risky, trusting Adrian's people with something this critical, but it was also the smart play given the circumstances. Alara provided the information, then settled back for the long drive to Montreal. They crossed the border at dusk, using credentials Adrian had provided that identified them as corporate security for a legitimate business. The border agents barely glanced at their documents before waving them through. Montreal was beautiful in the fading light, old European architecture mixed with modern glass towers, the St. Lawrence River reflecting colors like oil on water. Alara had operated here twice during her service, spoke fluent French, knew the city's rhythms. It felt like returning to a place that remembered her even if she'd forgotten it. The safe house Adrian had arranged was in the Plateau neighborhood, a 3rd-floor apartment in an old building with good sight lines and multiple exits. They arrived separately, in stages, using counter-surveillance protocols to ensure they weren't followed. Inside, the apartment was sparse but functional. Secure communications equipment, weapons locker, enough supplies for a week-long siege if necessary. Alara moved to the window, looking down at the street where evening crowds moved with characteristic Montreal energy. "Bank team is in position," Katya reported, earpiece active. "They're waiting for final authorization to proceed." Adrian's voice came through the speaker system patched in from his estate. "Alara, you're certain about the box number?" "Certain. Box 347, registered under the name Marie Dubois. And the biometric override will work?" "Should. The bank uses a standard security system. Your team knows what to do?" "They're professionals. Give them 20 minutes." The wait was excruciating. Alara paced the apartment, unable to sit still, mind running through contingencies and worst-case scenarios. What if the box had been discovered? What if Obsidian was waiting at the bank? What if the key fragment had degraded over 5 years? 18 minutes later, a knock at the door. Davies checked the security camera, confirmed the identity, and let in a young woman carrying a small leather case. She handed it to Alara without a word, then disappeared back into the night. Inside the case was the 3rd USB drive, intact and unmarked. Alara held it up to the light, feeling the weight of 5 years of paranoid preparation. "We have all 3 keys." "Excellent," Adrian said through the speakers. "Return to the estate. We'll decrypt the files here where it's secure." "Agreed. We're moving now." The journey back felt longer than the journey out. Alara clutched the case with the USB drives, 3 pieces of encrypted evidence that might be enough to save their lives, or might be worthless. No way to know until they tried. They crossed back into the United States at midnight, took a circuitous route through upstate New York, and arrived at the estate as dawn was breaking. Alara had been awake for nearly 30 hours, running on adrenaline and caffeine, but sleep would have to wait. Adrian met them in the foyer, his expression tight with concern that he tried to mask. "Any trouble on the return?" "None. Clean all the way back." "Good. Get some rest. We'll start decryption this afternoon once Dmitri returns from Zurich." "He's back?" "Landed 2 hours ago. Successful retrieval, no complications." Adrian's smile was grim. "We have everything we need. Now we just need to make it work." Alara climbed the stairs to her room, exhaustion finally catching up to her. She collapsed on the bed still fully clothed, the case with the USB drives clutched against her chest like a talisman. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that they were committed now. No more hiding, no more running. Whatever came next would determine whether they'd gambled correctly or simply accelerated their own deaths. Either way, the waiting was almost over. She woke to knocking on her door 8 hours later, Mrs. Sokolov's voice. "Miss Vance, Mr. Volkov requests your presence in the operations center." Alara showered quickly, changed clothes, and headed downstairs. The operations center was the same secure room where she'd made contact with her teammates weeks ago, now transformed into something resembling a military command post. Multiple computers, 3 large screens on the walls, security feeds running constantly. Adrian, Elena, and Dmitri were already there, along with someone Alara didn't recognize, a thin man in his 40s with the particular pallor of someone who spent too much time in front of screens. "This is Marcus," Adrian introduced, "encryption specialist. He's going to help us access your files." Marcus barely glanced up from his keyboard. "USB drives, please." Alara handed over the 3 key fragments. Marcus inserted them into a custom-built device, fingers flying across keyboards, code cascading down screens faster than she could follow. "Interesting architecture," he muttered. "Triple-layer encryption, each layer requiring separate physical key. Biometric verification checksum. Whoever designed this knew what they were doing." "I had good training," Alara said. "Clearly. This is going to take a few hours, maybe more if there are additional security measures I'm not seeing yet." While Marcus worked, Dmitri presented what he'd retrieved from Zurich. Physical documents in sealed folders, photographs that had aged poorly but remained legible, financial records from the Georgian safehouse raid. He spread them across a table like evidence at a crime scene. "This is everything I kept," he said. "Transaction records showing weapons sales from Russian military stockpiles to sanctioned countries. Shipping manifests with Konstantin Volkov's signature on authorizations. Photos of meetings between Russian officials and arms dealers." He tapped one particular photograph. "This was taken 3 days before we extracted the defector. That's Konstantin, meeting with a Syrian contact who was buying anti-aircraft systems." Elena leaned over the documents, her trained eye cataloging details. "This is good. Damning, even. But it's 5 years old, could be dismissed as ancient history." "Unless we can connect it to current activities," Adrian said. He pulled up files on one of the large screens. "I've been tracking Konstantin's financial movements for years, part of monitoring my uncle's attempts to undermine me. Look at this." He highlighted a series of transactions. Payments to the same shell companies, same Cayman Island accounts, continuing right up to last month. He's still running weapons deals, just being more careful about paper trails. "Can you prove the current transactions connect to illegal sales?" Alara asked. "Not definitively, but combined with your historical evidence, it creates a pattern. Pattern suggests ongoing criminal activity, which is exactly what we need for leverage." Marcus spoke up without turning from his screens. "First layer decrypted, moving to layer 2. This is elegant work, really. The way the encryption keys interdepend, the biometric verification. You could teach a masterclass on operational security." "I'd rather not be teaching anything related to my former career," Alara said dryly. Another hour passed. Adrian ordered food brought in. They ate without tasting, attention fixed on Marcus's progress. The second encryption layer fell, then the third. Finally, Marcus leaned back with a satisfied expression. "We're in. Files are decrypting now. Should have full access in 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes felt eternal. Alara watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, each percentage point representing data she'd encrypted 5 years ago, information she'd hoped never to need. When the bar hit 100%, the screen filled with files, dozens of them, text documents, audio recordings, scanned images, the complete deposition of the Georgian defector, everything he'd told them before his death. Alara began reading, memories flooding back with each line. The defector had been thorough, naming names, detailing transactions, providing documentation, and there, again and again, appeared Konstantin Volkov's name. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is enough." Adrian was already reading, his expression growing darker. "This is more than enough. If this information went public, Konstantin would be finished. Criminal charges, international sanctions, political destruction. His career would be over." "Which is exactly why he's trying to kill everyone who might have seen it," Elena said, "and exactly why this is our insurance." Adrian pulled out his phone. I'm going to make copies, distribute them to secure locations with dead man switches. If anything happens to any of us, everything gets released simultaneously to media outlets, government agencies, and international criminal courts. He'll know we're bluffing, Dmitri objected. Releasing this information would expose us too, prove we were involved in illegal operations. Not bluffing, deterring, mutually assured destruction. We go down, he goes down harder. Adrian was already typing messages. The key is making him believe we're desperate enough to do it, that we have nothing left to lose. Alara thought about the 4 dead teammates, about 3 years hiding in plain sight, about the attack on the estate and the chase through Boston. We don't have to make him believe we're desperate. We are desperate, and he should understand that desperate people are the most dangerous. Over the next 2 days, they assembled the complete package. Dimitri's documents, Alara's decrypted files, Adrian's financial tracking data, all combined into a comprehensive dossier of Konstantin Volkov's criminal activities spanning 5 years. Marcus created encrypted copies and distributed them to 12 different secure locations around the world, each with automated release protocols. Then came the difficult part, making contact. We can't just send this to him directly, Elena argued. That's too confrontational. He'll respond with overwhelming force. We need an intermediary, Adrian agreed, someone he trusts, someone who can present this as negotiation rather than threat. Do you have someone? Alara asked. Adrian's smile was unpleasant. I have exactly the right person, someone who works for Konstantin but owes me several significant favors, someone who will present our case in terms Konstantin understands. The message they crafted was simple and direct. Evidence of your weapons dealing activities has been compiled and secured. Any further hostile action against former intelligence operatives will result in complete public release. Stand down, and this information remains buried. Continue, and we all burn together. The intermediary delivered the message 3 days later. Then they waited. The response came faster than expected. 18 hours after delivery, Adrian's phone rang. Number blocked. Voice scrambled, but the accent unmistakably Russian. You're playing a very dangerous game, nephew, Konstantin's voice said, threatening me with information you shouldn't possess. I'm offering you a simple transaction, uncle. Your survival for ours, very reasonable, I think. The people you're protecting are criminals, former operatives from an illegal intelligence organization. They deserve no protection. And yet, here we are, with evidence that could destroy your career and possibly your life. What they deserve seems irrelevant compared to what we possess. Silence on the line. Then, I want proof. Send me a sample of what you claim to have. Adrian glanced at Alara, who nodded. They'd anticipated this request, prepared a carefully curated selection that proved authenticity without revealing everything. Sending now, Adrian said. He tapped his phone, transferring encrypted files. That's 10% of what we have. Enough to verify, not enough to prepare defenses against. Another silence, longer this time. You realize this changes nothing. Evidence can be discredited. Witnesses can be silenced. You're not as safe as you think. Neither are you. The files are distributed with dead man switches. Anything happens to us, everything releases automatically. You can't kill all of us fast enough to prevent it. Perhaps. Or perhaps you're bluffing. Perhaps you care too much about your own survival to actually trigger mutual destruction. Test that theory if you like, Adrian said coldly. But understand, these people have already lost everything. They've watched their teammates die. They've lived as ghosts for years. They have nothing left to lose, uncle. Can you say the same? The call ended without further words. Adrian set down his phone and looked at the assembled group. Alara, Elena, Dmitri, all watching him with varying expressions of hope and dread. Now we wait again, he said, and hope he's smart enough to accept the deal. And if he's not, Dmitri asked, then we find out if we're actually willing to burn everything down. Adrian's expression was grim. And pray we survive whatever comes next. The waiting was its own kind of torture. 3 days passed with no word from Konstantin. 3 days where every sound could be the prelude to an attack. Every unfamiliar vehicle could be carrying assassins. The estate remained on high alert. Guards doubled. Security protocols tightened until movement felt restricted, claustrophobic. Alara spent the time training, pushing her body through drills that left her exhausted enough to sleep without nightmares. Elena joined her most mornings, the two women falling into familiar rhythms from their operational days, sparring matches that evolved into full combat scenarios, verbal briefings delivered in clipped military cadence, the comfortable silence of people who'd once trusted each other with their lives. On the fourth morning, as they were finishing a particularly brutal hand-to-hand session, Elena spoke the question that had been hovering unspoken between them. "Do you trust him?" she asked, wiping sweat from her face. "Adrian, I mean? Really trust him?" Elora considered her answer carefully. "I trust that his interests align with ours right now. That's more than I can say about anyone else." "That's not the same as trust." "No, but it's enough." Elena walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where morning light painted everything gold and deceptive. "He looks at you differently than he looks at the rest of us. Like you're more than just an asset to be protected. He looks at me like I'm a puzzle he's still trying to solve." "Maybe. Or maybe like someone he's decided is worth keeping safe regardless of strategic value." Elena turned back to face her. "Be careful, Sparrow. Men like Adrian don't do anything without calculating the cost. If he's investing in you emotionally, he'll expect a return. I'm not planning to give him one. Plans change, especially when you're living in someone's house, eating at their table, depending on their protection." Elena's expression was serious, almost sad. "I've seen it happen before. Good operatives compromised because they confuse proximity with connection." Elora wanted to argue, to insist that she was too trained, too careful, too aware of manipulation tactics to fall into that trap. But Elena's words struck closer to truth than was comfortable. She had grown accustomed to Adrian's presence, found his strategic mind engaging, appreciated the way he treated her as an equal rather than a subordinate. Whether that appreciation had evolved into something more complicated was a question she wasn't ready to examine. Before she could respond, Gregor appeared in the doorway of the gym, his expression urgent. "Mr. Volkov wants everyone in the operations center, immediately." They found Adrian already there, staring at multiple screens with an intensity that suggested bad news. Dmitri arrived moments later, hair disheveled from sleep, still wearing yesterday's clothes. "We have a problem," Adrian said without preamble. He pulled up a video feed on the main screen. This was recorded 3 hours ago at a private airfield outside Vienna. The footage showed a private jet taxiing to a hangar. As they watched, a figure emerged from the aircraft, tall, silver-haired, moving with the confident stride of someone who owned whatever space he occupied. Konstantin Volkov. "He's early," Elena said. "The security conference isn't for another 3 weeks." "Which means he's not in Vienna for the conference." Adrian switched to another screen showing satellite imagery. "This is the location where his plane landed, private airfield owned by a defense contractor with known connections to Obsidian Group." The implications settled over the room like toxic fog. Konstantin wasn't accepting their deal. He was escalating. "He's meeting with Obsidian," Dmitri said flatly, "planning another attack." "Worse than that." Adrian pulled up intercepted communications, fragments of encrypted messages that his intelligence network had captured. "My sources indicate he's authorized a final operation. All remaining targets to be eliminated simultaneously within the next 72 hours. "All remaining targets," Ilara repeated. "That's us. The 3 of us. Plus me for having the audacity to protect you." Adrian's jaw was tight. He's decided the risk of mutual destruction is worth eliminating the threat we pose. "He's calling our bluff," Elena said, "betting we won't actually release the evidence because it would destroy us too." "Then we need to prove we're not bluffing." Dimitri's voice was hard. "Release everything now, before he can move." "No." Ilara's response was immediate. "If we release now, we lose our only leverage. Konstantin goes down, but we're exposed. Every intelligence agency in the world will be hunting us for the operations we conducted. Better hunted by agencies with bureaucratic restraints than murdered by contractors with none," Dmitri countered. "There's another option." Adrian was typing rapidly, pulling up more files, more data streams. "We don't wait for him to come to us. We go to Vienna. We force a direct confrontation on our terms." The suggestion was met with immediate resistance. "That's suicide," Elena said. "Walking into the city where he's meeting with the people hired to kill us? We'd be dead before we cleared customs. Not if we do it properly. Not if we use the conference as cover." Adrian's eyes had taken on that calculating gleam that meant he'd already wargamed several scenarios. The security conference starts in 3 weeks, but preliminary meetings begin in 10 days. I have an invitation. I'm listed as a private security consultant, which is technically accurate. I can bring a team. A team that includes 3 people Constantine wants dead, Dmitri pointed out. A team that includes 3 people with intelligence backgrounds who can navigate a conference full of former military and intelligence personnel without standing out. Adrian looked at each of them in turn. Think about it. Hundreds of security professionals from around the world, all in one place. Perfect cover for moving unnoticed, and perfect venue for a very public confrontation if necessary. Alara's tactical mind was already running through possibilities. You want to force him into a situation where he can't act without witnesses, where attacking us would expose him. Exactly. Constantine operates in shadows, uses proxies, maintains plausible deniability. Put him in a public forum with cameras and witnesses, make it clear that anything happening to us would immediately trigger evidence release, and suddenly the cost-benefit analysis changes. Or he kills us anyway and deals with the fallout, Elena said. Men like Constantine don't respond well to being cornered. Men like Constantine are also politicians who care about appearances. Destroying his career over killing 4 people isn't rational, and whatever else he is, my uncle is rational. Adrian pulled up a schematic of the Vienna Conference Center. We go in with full security, we stay in public spaces, and we arrange a meeting with him under controlled circumstances. We make our case face-to-face, make him understand that standing down is his only viable option. And if he doesn't agree, Alara asked, then we trigger the dead man switches and go to ground. But at least we'll have tried negotiation first. Adrian's expression was grim. Look, I don't like this any more than you do. But sitting here waiting for Obsidian to attack is passive suicide. At least this way we're acting instead of reacting. Silence filled the room as they each processed the proposal. It was risky, aggressive, potentially catastrophic. It was also the first proactive move they'd had available since this started. Finally, Elena spoke. If we do this, we need a real plan, not just show up and hope for the best. Full operational planning, contingencies, extraction protocols. Agreed, Adrian said. We have 10 days to prepare. That's enough time to do this properly. I want veto power, Alara said. If at any point I assess the risk as unacceptable, we abort. No arguments. Adrian met her eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, respect, maybe something more complicated that neither wanted to name. Agreed. Your assessment, your call. Dmitri rubbed his face, exhaustion and stress evident in every line. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm in. Better to die on our feet than waiting in a cage. Then we're committed. Adrian pulled up a calendar. Conference preliminary sessions start November 15th. That gives us 9 days to prepare. Let's make them count. The next week passed in intense preparation. Adrian's contacts secured them credentials for the conference. Alara as a translator specializing in Eastern European languages, Elena as a security consultant with expertise in counter-surveillance, Dmitri as a private military contractor. All plausible, all providing legitimate reasons to attend. They drilled constantly, running through scenarios and contingencies. What if Constantine refused to meet? What if he brought Obsidian operators to the conference? What if Austrian authorities became involved? Each possibility was examined, analyzed, planned for. Marcus, the encryption specialist, enhanced their dead man switches with additional layers of security. Now 12 different people around the world held encrypted fragments. If any of the 4 didn't check in every 24 hours, automatic release protocols would trigger. Mutually assured destruction, updated for the digital age, Marcus said with something like pride. Even if Constantine kills all of you simultaneously, the evidence releases. His only option is keeping you alive. Assuming he's rational enough to accept that, Elena muttered. He will be, Adrian said with more confidence than Alara felt. Survival instinct trumps pride. Always has. On the 6th day of preparation, Victor resurfaced. Gregor brought the news to Adrian's office where they were reviewing Vienna's street maps. Sir, we have a situation. Viktor Sokolov just arrived at the front gate. He's requesting an audience. Adrian's expression hardened. The man whose bounty started this entire mess wants an audience? Tell him to go to hell. He says it's about your uncle. Says he has information you need. That changed things. Adrian considered for a long moment, then nodded. Search him thoroughly. If he's clean, bring him to the South Library, and keep guards present throughout. 20 minutes later, Victor entered the library, flanked by 2 of Adrian's security team. He looked diminished somehow, less arrogant than Alara remembered from their encounters. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face haggard. Adrian, he said, attempting his old swagger and failing. Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes before I have you thrown out. Speak. Victor glanced at Alara, something complicated crossing his face. Embarrassment, resentment, fear. The bounty I put out on your translator. I need to cancel it officially. Make clear she's under your protection. I already made that clear when I told you to cancel it weeks ago. Yes, but I never actually did. And now... Victor swallowed hard. Now Konstantin Volkov has picked up the contract. He's offering triple what I was, $300,000 for her location, $500,000 for her delivered alive. Alara felt ice flood her veins. $500,000 was serious money, the kind that would attract every bounty hunter and opportunistic criminal in Eastern Europe. When did this happen? Adrian demanded. 3 days ago. The offer went out on encrypted networks I monitor. I came as soon as I confirmed it was legitimate. Victor's voice took on a pleading edge. Adrian, I made mistakes. I was angry after you embarrassed me. I wanted revenge. I didn't think it would escalate to this. But Konstantin is a different category of threat. If he's actively hunting your people, you need to know. Why are you telling me this? Alara asked, speaking for the first time. What do you gain? Victor met her eyes with something like respect. Because I'm many things, but I'm not suicidal. You put me on the ground in that warehouse without breaking a sweat. If Konstantin succeeds in killing you, he'll turn his attention to everyone else who knew about you. That includes me. He turned back to Adrian. I'm trying to survive, same as you, and right now survival means you knowing exactly what you're facing. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, assessing. Finally, he nodded. You've delivered your information. Now leave my property and stay away from anything involving Alara Vance. If I hear you've been asking questions or spreading information, our next conversation will be significantly less cordial. Understood. Victor stood, started toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The offer Konstantin put out. It includes a bonus for information about your security arrangements, your estate layout, your travel plans. He's not just hunting her, he's planning something comprehensive. After Victor was escorted out, the room remained silent for several beats. $500,000, Dmitri finally said. That's going to attract serious attention. Which means Vienna just became even more dangerous, Elena added. Every mercenary and contractor in Europe will be watching for us. No. Alara's voice was cold, certain. It means Konstantin is desperate. You don't offer that kind of money unless you're running out of time and options. He knows the dead man switches are real. He's trying to eliminate us before we can trigger them. She's right, Adrian said. This is panic, not confidence, which means our plan to confront him in Vienna might actually work. Desperate men make mistakes. Or desperate men become unpredictably violent, Elena countered. Either way, we're committed now. Adrian pulled up the Vienna files again. Let's finalize the plan. We leave in 3 days. The final preparations were meticulous. They arranged accommodations at a hotel near the conference center, established multiple safe houses throughout Vienna as fallback positions, and coordinated with Adrian's European security contacts for support if needed. Mrs. Sokolov supervised the packing with the efficiency of someone who'd prepared for dangerous travel many times before. Clothes that don't stand out, shoes you can run in, always know where your exits are, she told Alara while reviewing her luggage. And trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. You've done this before, Alara observed. I've worked for the Volkov family for 23 years, Mrs. Sokolov said quietly. I've seen many things, survived many dangers. The most important lesson? Stay alive long enough for circumstances to change in your favor. The night before departure, Adrian found Alara in the estate's library, reviewing intelligence reports on Vienna's layout for the 100th time. She looked up as he entered, noting the 2 glasses of whiskey he carried. Thought you might need this, he said, offering one. She accepted, and they stood together at the window overlooking the dark grounds. Security lights created pools of illumination in the darkness, guards visible as they patrolled. "Are you scared?" Adrian asked after a long silence. "Terrified," Alara admitted. "But fear is just information. It tells you the stakes are real." That's a very operational way of looking at it. I was trained to be operational. She sipped the whiskey, feeling it burn pleasantly. "What about you? You're walking into a confrontation with your uncle who's already tried to destroy you multiple times. That can't be easy." Adrian's laugh was bitter. "My uncle has been trying to kill or discredit me since my father died. This is just another round in a game that's been playing for years." He paused. "Though I'll admit, the stakes feel higher this time." "Because of us?" "Because of you." He met her eyes. "Elena and Dmitri are assets, valuable ones. But you're something different. You're—" He trailed off, seeming to search for words. Alara waited, her heart beating faster than the moment warranted. "You're someone I'd prefer not to lose," he finished finally. "For strategic reasons, and others I'm less comfortable examining." "Adrian, don't." He held up a hand. "Don't say anything. I'm not asking for reciprocation or declarations. I'm just being honest, which you said you valued. After Vienna, after this is resolved one way or another, we'll figure out what happens next. But for now, I wanted you to know that protecting you isn't just business." Alara didn't know how to respond to that. 3 years of carefully maintained emotional distance, of refusing attachments, of being nobody to everyone, had left her unprepared for genuine connection. She'd been trained to use people, to manipulate emotional bonds for operational advantage. But this felt different, real in a way that made her deeply uncomfortable. "Thank you for being honest," she said finally. "I don't know what happens after Vienna either, but I'm glad you're in this with us." It wasn't the response he wanted. She could see that in his eyes. But he accepted it with a small nod, the moment passing into something less charged. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow is going to be demanding." They flew to Vienna on a private charter, arriving in the early evening when the city was transitioning from day to night. The November cold bit through Alara's jacket as they transferred to armored vehicles, the temperature a sharp contrast to the climate-controlled environments they'd inhabited for weeks. Vienna was beautiful in the fading light, all Baroque architecture and old-world elegance. The Danube reflected city lights like scattered diamonds. In another life, another circumstance, Alara might have appreciated it. As it was, she saw only tactical considerations. Sight lines, choke points, escape routes. Their hotel was a converted palace in the first district, 5-star luxury that catered to wealthy business travelers and diplomats. Adrian had booked an entire floor, controlling access and ensuring privacy. The rooms were opulent, all high ceilings and antique furniture, but Alara barely noticed. She was too busy checking security, identifying vulnerabilities, preparing for possibilities. They gathered in Adrian's suite for final briefing. Elena had already established contact with conference organizers, confirmed their credentials were accepted, and mapped the venue layout. Dmitri had identified 3 Obsidian Group contractors registered as conference attendees under false credentials. "They're here," he said, pulling up surveillance photos on his laptop. "Registered as security consultants from a Romanian firm that exists only on paper. I've confirmed visual identification on 2 of them. Both were involved in operations against our former teammates." "Which means Constantine knows we're coming," Elena said. "So much for the element of surprise." "We never had surprise," Adrian countered. "We have audacity. We're walking into his operation and forcing confrontation. The question is whether he'll meet with us or try to eliminate us immediately." "I can answer that." Alara pulled out her phone, showing a message that had arrived during their flight. It was brief, sent from an encrypted number. "Imperial Hotel. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone, or don't come at all." "Constantine?" Adrian asked. "His intermediary. Same contact who delivered our original message." Alara set down the phone. "He's willing to meet, but only me. No security, no witnesses." "Absolutely not," Adrian said immediately. "That's an obvious trap." "Probably. But it's also our only chance at direct negotiation." Alara looked at her teammates, saw their concern mirrored in their expressions. "If I don't go, we're back to waiting for him to attack. At least this way, we're moving forward." "Moving forward into an ambush," Elena said. "Maybe. Or maybe he's genuinely willing to talk." Alara pulled up information on the Imperial Hotel, a famous landmark in Vienna's center, always crowded, very public. He chose a location with hundreds of witnesses. That suggests he's not planning immediate violence. Or he's confident he can make violence look like something else, Dmitri countered. They argued for an hour, debating options and risks. Finally, they reached a compromise. Alara would attend the meeting, but not truly alone. Adrian's security team would establish positions throughout the hotel. Elena would be in an adjacent room with a clear sightline through windows. Dmitri would monitor from a vehicle outside with rapid response capabilities. "And you'll be wearing this," Adrian said, producing a small device that looked like an expensive brooch. "Audio transmitter, panic button, and GPS tracker. We'll hear everything, and if you trigger the panic function, we'll be there in under 30 seconds. It was the best they could do without violating Konstantin's demand for no obvious security. Alara accepted the brooch, pinned it to her jacket, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. The next day passed with agonizing slowness. Morning briefings, equipment checks, contingency planning. Alara dressed carefully in a dark suit that looked professional while allowing freedom of movement, chose shoes she could fight or run in, and reviewed the intelligence files on Konstantin one final time. At 2:30, she left the hotel alone, walking through Vienna's streets toward the Imperial. November sunshine filtered through clouds, making everything look softer than it was. Tourists and locals moved around her, oblivious to the fact that a woman marked for death was walking among them. The Imperial Hotel was exactly as grand as its reputation suggested, all marble and gold leaf in old Habsburg elegance. Alara entered through the main doors, crossed a lobby filled with well-dressed guests, and took the elevator to the third floor as instructed. Room 347. She knocked twice, waited. The door opened to reveal not Konstantin, but a younger man in a dark suit, security, obviously armed, assessing her with professional thoroughness. "Miss Vance," he said in accented English, "please, enter." The suite beyond was spacious, decorated in the Imperial's signature style of understated luxury, and seated in a wing chair near the window, looking every inch the powerful government minister, was Konstantin Volkov. He was older than his photographs suggested, mid-60s with that particular kind of distinguished aging that came from wealth and good health care. Silver hair perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than most cars, eyes that were winter cold just like his nephew's. "Alara Vance," he said, his voice cultured, accentless. "Or should I call you Sparrow? I understand that was your operational designation. Whichever makes this conversation shorter." Alara remained standing, maintaining distance, aware of the security guard positioned by the door. "You wanted to meet. Here I am." "Yes, here you are." Konstantin gestured to a chair across from him. "Please sit. This needn't be confrontational. You've spent 6 months having my former teammates murdered. I think confrontational is appropriate." "Murdered is such a crude word. I prefer eliminated. They were security risks, you understand. People who knew things that could damage important operations. They were people, with lives, with names, with the right to exist without being hunted." Konstantin's smile was cold. "You speak of rights as if they matter in our world. We both know better. You were trained by an organization that operated outside all laws, all morality. You eliminated targets, extracted intelligence, conducted operations that would be considered war crimes if anyone knew about them. Don't pretend to moral high ground you surrendered years ago." The words stung because they contained truth. Alara had done terrible things in service to an organization she'd believed was protecting people. Whether that belief had been justified was a question that haunted her quiet moments. "I'm not claiming moral superiority," she said. "I'm claiming the right to self-defense. You came after us. We're simply trying to survive. By threatening to expose information that would destroy me, information you obtained through illegal operations." Konstantin leaned forward slightly. "Do you really think anyone would care about your evidence? You're criminals, former operatives from a shadow organization. Any testimony you provide would be dismissed as fabrication. Maybe, or maybe the documentation we have, transaction records, shipping manifests, photographs, audio recordings, would be enough for international prosecutors to investigate. Maybe the embarrassment alone would end your political career." Alara met his eyes steadily. Either way, you lose, which is why you should accept our deal. Your deal, yes. Constantine stood, walking to the window that overlooked Vienna's rooftops. Stand down, allow you to live, and trust that you'll never use the evidence you possess. That's what you're proposing. With dead man switches, ensuring mutual destruction if you renege. It's a stable arrangement. Stable until one of you decides to leverage the information for personal gain, or until you're captured by authorities and trade my secrets for leniency, or until you simply grow a conscience and decide the world deserves to know the truth. He turned back to face her. You're asking me to live with a sword hanging over my head indefinitely. That's not acceptable. Then what is acceptable? You can't kill us all. The dead man switches are real and distributed. Attack any of us, and everything releases automatically. I'm aware. That's why I'm here, negotiating instead of simply having you shot. Constantine returned to his chair, steepling his fingers. I want the evidence. All copies, all fragments, all dead man switches deactivated. In exchange, I'll call off Obsidian Group and guarantee your safety. You want us to give up our only leverage and trust that you'll keep your word. Alara couldn't quite keep the disbelief from her voice. That's insane. It's the only arrangement I'll accept. Complete destruction of the evidence, or we continue as we have been. His expression hardened. And before you refuse, understand that I have resources you can't imagine. I can make your lives very difficult without killing you. Family members investigated, financial accounts frozen, every former contact pressured. I can destroy you socially, financially, professionally, leaving you alive but wishing you weren't. The threat hung in the air, ugly and credible. Alara's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. I need to consult with my partners, she said finally. You have 24 hours. Tomorrow, same time, same place, you'll give me your answer. Agree to destroy the evidence or accept the consequences of refusal. Constantine stood, signaling the end of the meeting. And Miss Vance? Don't make the mistake of thinking my nephew can protect you indefinitely. Adrian is talented but limited. I am neither. The security guard opened the door. Alara stood, maintaining composure despite the rage and fear churning in her gut. One question, she said. The defector from Tbilisi. Did you have him killed? Constantine's smile was answer enough. He was going to destroy careers, including mine. I did what was necessary. He tilted his head slightly. Just as you did what was necessary in Moscow and Singapore and Berlin, we're not so different, you and I. We both understand that survival requires difficult choices. We're nothing alike. Keep telling yourself that. But we both know the truth. He moved toward a different door, one that would lead to a private exit. 24 hours, Miss Vance. Choose wisely. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone with the security guard who gestured politely toward the exit. She left the Imperial in a daze, barely aware of her surroundings until Elena's voice crackled in her earpiece. We heard everything. Are you safe? Yes. Heading back now. The return to their hotel passed in a blur. When she entered Adrian's suite, all three of them were waiting. Adrian at his laptop reviewing the audio recording, Elena and Dmitri at the window maintaining watch. Well, Dmitri said, that went about as badly as possible. He wants the evidence destroyed completely, Alara said unnecessarily. They'd all heard. In exchange for calling off the hunt, which we absolutely cannot accept, Elena said. The moment we destroy the evidence, we're defenseless. He'd have us killed within days. I know. But we also can't refuse and survive his promised retaliation, Adrian added. Constantine has resources to make life unbearable without technically breaking our agreement. They stood in silence, the impossibility of their situation settling over them like a shroud, trapped between two unacceptable options, running out of time to find a third. Finally, Alara spoke the thought that had been forming since leaving the Imperial. We can't negotiate with him. He's not interested in compromise. He wants complete victory or nothing, which means we need to change the game entirely. How? Adrian asked. We stop playing defense. We stop reacting to his moves. Alara pulled up the conference schedule on her phone. Tomorrow night, there's a gala. Major reception for all conference attendees, media presence. The Austrian Minister of Defense will be speaking. Very public. Very visible. And, Dmitri prompted, and Constantine will be there. He's listed as a guest speaker on European security cooperation. She looked at each of them. What if instead of meeting him privately, we confront him publicly? Force him to respond in front of witnesses, in front of cameras, where he can't simply threaten or intimidate. That's incredibly dangerous, Elena said. You'd be exposing yourself, confirming your presence in Vienna to every contractor and mercenary looking for that bounty. I'm already exposed. Victor proved that when he told us about the bounty. Better to use visibility as a weapon than pretend we have any anonymity left. Adrian was staring at her with something like awe. You want to make him choose between attacking you in public, which would destroy him politically, or accepting a very visible stalemate. Exactly. We can't beat him in shadows. He's too powerful, too connected. But in the light, in front of witnesses who matter, that's where we might have leverage. It's audacious, Dmitri said slowly. Insane, but audacious. It's also our only real option, unless someone has a better idea. Ilara looked around the room, saw calculation replacing despair in her teammates' eyes. We attend the gala tomorrow. We make sure Constantine sees us, and then we make him understand that we're not going away quietly. And if he calls our bluff? Elena asked. If he has us arrested or attacked despite the witnesses? Then we release everything and go down fighting. Ilara's voice was hard, certain. But at least we'll have taken our shot instead of just waiting to die. The room fell silent as they each considered the proposal. It was risky, aggressive, potentially suicidal. It was also the first plan that felt like taking control rather than reacting to threats. Adrian stood, walking to the window that overlooked Vienna's nightscape. We'll need to prepare carefully. Security positions, contingency plans, clear roles for each of us. This can't be improvised. Agreed, Elena said. I'll work out positioning and sightlines for the gala venue. I'll arrange our credentials and ensure we're on the guest list, Dmitri added, and prepare extraction routes in case things go wrong. They spent the next 6 hours planning, the suite transforming into a temporary operations center. Maps of the conference center spread across tables, security layouts analyzed, every possible scenario wargamed. It felt like old times, the four of them working together toward a common objective, the comfortable intensity of professionals preparing for combat. As midnight approached, they finally stopped, exhausted but as ready as they could be. Get some rest, Adrian said. Tomorrow we find out if we're brilliant or insane. Probably both, Ilara said, but she was smiling as she headed to her room. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat by her window watching Vienna's lights, thinking about the path that had brought her here. From orphan child to trained operative to waitress to whatever she was now, someone willing to walk into danger for the chance at something resembling freedom. Tomorrow would determine whether that willingness was courage or just another form of suicide. Either way, the waiting was finally over. The gala began at 7, but Ilara and her team arrived at 6:30, early enough to establish positions before the crowd became overwhelming. The Vienna Conference Center's grand ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Waiters in white jackets circulated with champagne. A string quartet played near the entrance. Everything refined, elegant, civilized. The perfect setting for a confrontation that could turn deadly in seconds. Ilara wore a midnight blue dress that Elena had helped her select, elegant enough to blend with the formal crowd while allowing freedom of movement. The fabric concealed a thin Kevlar panel across her torso. Her shoes had low heels she could run or fight in. The brooch from yesterday was pinned at her shoulder, transmitting everything to the team's encrypted channel. Adrian entered beside her, looking every inch the successful businessman in a tailored tuxedo. But Ilara noticed the slight bulge under his left arm. He was armed despite the venue's security protocols. His connections had cleared the way. Elena and Dmitri arrived separately, blending into the crowd as they took up positions around the ballroom. Elena near the eastern exit, Dmitri by the main entrance. Outside, Adrian's security team maintained perimeter watch, ready to move if needed. Target acquired, Elena's voice murmured through Ilara's concealed earpiece. Northeast corner surrounded by diplomats and defense contractors. He's holding court. Ilara located Constantine across the ballroom, exactly where Elena indicated. He stood in a circle of important-looking people, smiling, shaking hands, playing the role of respected minister. No visible security, but Alara knew they were there, at least 3 men positioned strategically around him. Obsidian contractors are also present, Dimitri added quietly. I've identified 4, possibly 5. They're trying to blend, but their positioning gives them away. Too tactical, too aware. Understood, Adrian murmured. Everyone stay sharp. This could go wrong very quickly. They waited, circulating separately, watching for opportunities. The ballroom filled with guests, military officials, intelligence personnel, private security contractors, all mingling in that particular way powerful people did when conducting business under the guise of socializing. At 7:30, the Austrian Minister of Defense gave a speech about European security cooperation. Polite applause followed. Then the Master of Ceremonies introduced Konstantin Volkov, praising his contributions to international stability. Alara watched as Konstantin took the podium, commanding attention effortlessly. He spoke about security challenges, about the need for cooperation between nations, about protecting citizens from threats both foreign and domestic. His words were measured, reasonable, painting him as a statesman concerned with safety. The irony was bitter. This man who spoke of protecting citizens had ordered the deaths of at least 7 people in the past year, would kill more without hesitation if it served his interests. As Konstantin's speech concluded to warm applause, Alara made her decision. I'm moving, she said quietly into her mic. Stay positioned but ready. Alara, wait, Adrian started, but she was already walking forward. The crowd parted as she approached the podium where Konstantin was descending, still surrounded by admirers. She moved with purpose, direct, impossible to ignore. Several heads turned, conversations faltering as people noticed the beautiful woman in the blue dress cutting through the crowd like a blade. Konstantin saw her when she was 10 feet away. His expression flickered, surprise, calculation. Then that cold diplomatic mask settling back into place. Minister Volkov, Alara said in perfect Russian, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet around them. I believe we have unfinished business from yesterday. The circle of diplomats around Konstantin looked confused, uncertain how to react. Konstantin himself maintained his composure, though Alara saw tension in his shoulders. I'm afraid you have me confused with someone else, he said in English, dismissive. I don't believe we've met. No? The Imperial Hotel, room 347, 3 p.m. yesterday. You gave me 24 hours to consider your proposal. Alara smiled, sharp and dangerous. I've considered it. The answer is no. Now the crowd was definitely paying attention. Conversations had stopped within a 20-foot radius. Konstantin's security personnel were moving closer, hands near concealed weapons. Miss, I think you may have had too much champagne, Konstantin said, trying to laugh it off. Perhaps someone should help you find a seat. I'm perfectly sober, and I'm not going anywhere until we finish our conversation about the Tbilisi defector, the weapons deals you orchestrated, and the people you've had murdered to cover it up. The words hung in the air like grenades. Konstantin's expression went from dismissive to dangerous in a heartbeat. Around them, guests were pulling out phones, recording, the moment becoming documented in real time. You're making a scene, Konstantin said quietly, switching to Russian. And a mistake you won't survive. I'm making sure there are witnesses, Alara replied in the same language. Every camera in this room is now evidence. Every person here is a potential witness. You can't make me disappear quietly anymore. I can have you arrested, charged with harassment, disturbing the peace, whatever authorities I choose. And I can trigger the release of every piece of evidence we discussed yesterday. Transaction records, photographs, audio recordings of your confession about ordering the Tbilisi defector's death. She paused, letting that sink in. All distributed with dead man switches. You attack me, you attack any of us. Everything goes public automatically. Konstantin's jaw clenched. Across the ballroom, Alara saw Adrian moving closer, positioning himself within reach. Elena and Dimitri were also converging, creating a loose perimeter. You're bluffing, Konstantin said. You wouldn't destroy yourself just to hurt me. Try me. I've lost everything already. What do I have left to protect? Alara's voice was ice. But you have a career, a reputation, political aspirations. You have everything to lose. So here's the new deal, Minister. You call off Obsidian Group permanently. You cancel the bounties. You leave us alone to live whatever lives we can build. And in exchange, your secrets stay buried. That's the same deal you offered before. No. Before you thought you could intimidate us privately. Now everyone in this room knows there's a dispute. Now if anything happens to us, investigators will know exactly where to look. She gestured around at the recording phones, the watching crowd. You wanted to make this about power? Fine. But power works both ways. For a long moment, Constantine stared at her, weighing options. Alara could see the calculation in his eyes. The cost of accepting versus the cost of refusing. Around them, the crowd watched with rapt attention, sensing they were witnessing something significant, even if they didn't understand all the details. Finally, one of the Obsidian contractors moved. Alara saw him out of the corner of her eye, hand reaching into his jacket, making the decision Constantine hadn't yet voiced. Everything happened in 3 seconds. The contractor drew a weapon. Adrian shouted a warning. Alara dropped, her dress tearing as she moved, muscle memory from years of training taking over. The gun fired. The shot going high, shattering a chandelier. Then chaos erupted. Screaming guests scattered in all directions. More shots fired from multiple locations. Obsidian contractors engaging Adrian's security team. Dmitri tackled one contractor near the entrance, his military training evident in the brutal efficiency of his movements. Elena had somehow produced a weapon and was providing cover fire. Alara rolled behind a serving table as bullets chewed into the wood. Her mind cataloged threats with cold precision. 3 contractors still active, Constantine's personal security trying to evacuate him. Austrian police would arrive in minutes. She caught sight of Adrian across the ballroom, exchanging fire with a contractor near the bar. He was competent, controlled, but outnumbered. Then she saw Constantine being hustled toward a service exit by his security team, escaping while his hired killers created chaos. Not acceptable. Alara sprinted from cover, ignoring the danger, focusing only on her target. She closed the distance in seconds, slammed into Constantine's security guard with enough force to send him stumbling. Before the others could react, she had Constantine by the arm, pressing something sharp against his ribs. "Move and I'll make sure you bleed slowly," she said in Russian, the improvised weapon, a shard of broken glass from the shattered chandelier, digging just deep enough to prove she meant it. Constantine's security froze, weapons drawn but not firing, unwilling to risk their principal. "Call them off," Alara demanded. "All of them. The contractors, the security, everyone. Now." "You're insane. You'll never leave this building alive." "Neither will you. I've got nothing to lose, remember?" She pressed the glass harder, felt him wince. "Call them off, or we both die here. Your choice." For 3 heartbeats, Constantine was silent. Gunfire continued around them, screams and breaking glass. The gala transformed into a war zone. Then Constantine raised his voice, shouting in Russian, "Stand down! Everyone! Cease fire immediately!" The effect wasn't instantaneous, but it spread. The Obsidian contractors hesitated, looked to each other, then began lowering weapons. Adrian's security team maintained their positions but stopped shooting. The sudden relative quiet was almost as shocking as the violence had been. Austrian police burst through the main entrance moments later, tactical teams in full gear shouting commands in German. The crowd, what remained of it, dropped to the ground. Weapons clattered to marble floors. Hands raised in surrender. Alara released Constantine, stepped back, dropping the glass shard and raising her own hands as police swarmed around them. She found Adrian in the chaos, met his eyes across the ballroom. He looked shaken, but uninjured, which was all that mattered. The next 6 hours were a blur of interrogation rooms, official statements, and careful diplomatic dancing. The Austrian authorities were furious that their security conference had turned into a shootout. Multiple people were injured, property destroyed, international guests traumatized. But no one was dead, which was something. Alara sat in a sterile interview room, giving her statement to a stern detective who clearly didn't believe half of what she was saying. Adrian's lawyers had arrived within an hour, expensive and competent, ensuring she didn't say anything that would incriminate her further. The story they constructed was careful, threading the needle between truth and deniability. Alara was a translator who'd been harassed by Minister Volkov. He'd made inappropriate advances, she'd refused, he'd retaliated by having her followed. Tonight she'd confronted him publicly, hoping witnesses would protect her. The violence was initiated by overzealous security personnel, not her. It was flimsy, barely plausible, but it was also impossible to disprove without revealing things Constantine couldn't afford to reveal. In a separate interview room, Constantine was giving his own statement. Alara couldn't hear it, but she could imagine some story about a disturbed woman making false accusations, security personnel overreacting, regrettable misunderstanding. At 3 a.m., they were finally released. No charges filed against anyone, at least not yet. The Austrian authorities clearly wanted the whole mess to disappear as quickly as possible. International incidents were politically complicated. Adrian found her in the lobby of the police station, looking exhausted but grimly satisfied. Elena and Dmitri are clear, he said. No charges, though they're being asked to leave Austria within 48 hours. We all are. And Constantine? Also being asked to leave. The Austrians don't want any of us around. Adrian smiled slightly. Diplomatic disasters are bad for tourism. They returned to the hotel in silence, too tired for analysis or celebration. In Adrian's suite, they found Elena and Dmitri already there, both looking worse for wear but alive. Well, Dmitri said as they entered, that was the most public confrontation in the history of intelligence operations. Possibly the stupidest thing we've ever done. But effective, Elena countered. Every phone in that ballroom was recording. The footage is already spreading online. Security conference shootout. Russian minister implicated. Constantine's political career is over, even if we never release the evidence. She was right. Alara had checked social media during the police interrogation. Videos of the confrontation were everywhere, being analyzed and speculated about on news sites around the world. The official story about a personal dispute wouldn't hold forever, not with this much public interest. What happens now? Dmitri asked. Adrian pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages, then turned the screen to show them. It was from Constantine's intermediary, sent an hour ago. The minister accepts your terms. All outstanding contracts are canceled effective immediately. He will not pursue further action against any party involved. In exchange, all evidence remains sealed. This matter is concluded. Silence filled the room as they processed the words. It's over? Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. The hunt is over, Adrian confirmed. Constantine knows he can't touch you without destroying himself. Between the public spectacle tonight and the evidence we hold, attacking you would be suicide. But the evidence remains, Alara said. The dead man's switches stay active. This isn't trust, it's mutually assured destruction, which is the most stable peace humans have ever achieved, Adrian replied. You're alive, he's neutralized. That's as close to winning as anyone gets in this world. Alara walked to the window, looking out at Vienna in the pre-dawn darkness. 3 years of hiding, 6 months of being hunted, and it ended not with a dramatic final battle, but with a standoff. No resolution, just exhausted enemies agreeing to stop trying to kill each other. It felt anticlimactic and perfect all at once. So what now? She asked, not turning from the window. Where do we go from here? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. They couldn't return to their old lives. Those were ashes. But they also couldn't remain in Vienna or even Europe. The Austrian authorities wanted them gone, and lingering would only invite new complications. I have operations in New York, Adrian said finally. Legitimate businesses that need skilled people. If you're interested. You're offering us jobs? Dmitri's tone was skeptical. I'm offering you a chance to be useful instead of hiding. You've all proven you're capable, resourceful, and willing to take necessary risks. Adrian looked at each of them. I can use people like that. And you need someone powerful enough to ensure Constantine doesn't change his mind about the truce. Elena and Dmitri exchanged glances, having some silent conversation that came from years of working together. I'm in, Dmitri said finally. I'm tired of running, tired of being nobody. If I'm going to survive, might as well do it somewhere I can be useful. Same, Elena agreed, though I want details on these operations before I commit long term. Fair enough. Adrian turned to Alara. And you? Alara was quiet for a long moment, thinking about trajectories and choices. 3 years ago, she'd tried to disappear, to become someone small and safe and forgettable. It hadn't worked. Maybe it had never been possible for someone like her. I need time to think, she said finally. This has been a lot. I need to process before making decisions about what comes next. Adrian nodded, accepting this. Take the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready. They left Vienna the next day on Adrian's private jet. the city falling away beneath them as they climbed into cold November skies. Alara watched through the window as Austria disappeared, replaced by clouds and distance. She thought about the waitress she'd been at the Velvet Iris, invisible and safe in her anonymity. That person felt like a stranger now, someone from a different life. The past months had stripped away the careful disguise, revealed what she actually was beneath the performance. The question was whether she wanted to keep being that person, or try once again to become someone else. They landed in New York as evening fell, the city lighting up beneath them like a constellation brought to Earth. Adrian's car service was waiting, ready to take them back to the estate in Westchester. But as they drove through Manhattan, Alara asked the driver to stop. "I need to see something," she said. They stopped in Tribeca, a few blocks from the Velvet Iris. Alara got out alone, told Adrian she'd meet him at the estate later, and walked through familiar streets that felt like they belonged to someone else's memory. The restaurant looked the same from the outside. Unmarked door, no sign, nothing to indicate the exclusive world hidden below. Alara descended the stairs, passed through the wine cellar with its security systems, and entered the dining room. It was early evening, just after opening. A handful of early guests sat at tables. Marco was at his station reviewing reservations. He looked up as she entered, did a double take. "Alara? I thought we heard you'd left the city." "I did. I'm just visiting." She walked through the dining room slowly, seeing it with new eyes. The tables where she'd served wine to men who didn't see her, the corner where Adrian had first noticed her, the path she'd walked 1,000 times carrying plates and glasses, and the weight of her own invisibility. "Are you coming back?" Marco asked hopefully. "We've been short-staffed since you left. That night with Mr. Volkov, after you disappeared, there were rumors." "I'm not coming back," Alara said gently. "But thank you. For the work, for not asking too many questions, for letting me hide here when I needed to." Marco looked confused but nodded. "You were a good employee. If you ever need a reference, I won't, but I appreciate the offer." She left the Velvet Iris for the last time, climbing the stairs into the Manhattan night. The cold air felt clean, sharp, real in a way the climate-controlled restaurant never had. This was who she'd been, a ghost serving wine, pretending not to exist. But that person was gone now, burned away by gunfire and confrontation and the simple act of refusing to keep hiding. The question was who she'd be next. She called Adrian from a street corner, traffic flowing around her like a river around stone. "I've decided," she said when he answered. "I'm accepting your offer. Whatever operations you have, whatever you need, I'm in." "You're sure? You said you needed time. I've had 3 years of time. Time to hide, time to pretend, time to be nobody. I'm done with that." Alara watched taxis stream past, feeling certainty settle in her bones. "I want to be useful. I want to matter. I want to be exactly what I am instead of apologizing for it." "Then welcome to the organization," Adrian said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Come home. We have work to do." Home. The word felt strange, unfamiliar. The estate wasn't home, not really. But maybe it could become something close. A place where she didn't have to hide, where her skills were valued instead of feared, where dangerous was an asset rather than a curse. Alara hailed a taxi, gave the driver Adrian's address, and settled back for the long drive to Westchester. Through the windows, New York streamed past in all its chaotic glory, millions of lives intersecting, stories beginning and ending, the endless human drama of survival and ambition and hope. She thought about Constantine, probably fleeing Vienna right now, his political career in ruins, even if he'd avoided criminal charges. He'd live, but diminished, always looking over his shoulder, knowing that evidence of his crimes existed somewhere in the world waiting to destroy him if he made the wrong move. She thought about Wolf, Raven, Bear, and the others who hadn't survived. They deserved better than to die as footnotes in someone's political machinations. Maybe someday she'd find a way to honor their memories properly. For now, surviving was enough. And she thought about Adrian, waiting at the estate with plans and operations and the promise of purpose. She didn't love him, wasn't sure she was capable of that kind of vulnerability anymore. But she respected him, trusted him within the narrow parameters where trust was possible, and found his company engaging in ways that surprised her. Maybe that was enough. Maybe love was another luxury for people with different lives. The estate's gates came into view just after midnight. They opened as the taxi approached, security recognizing the vehicle. Alara paid the driver and walked up the curved driveway toward the house, its windows lit against the darkness. Adrian was waiting on the steps, Elena and Dmitri flanking him. The three of them looked like the beginning of something, not quite a family, not exactly friends, but something functional and potentially powerful. "Took you long enough," Elena said as Alara approached. "I was saying goodbye to someone I used to be." "And hello to who exactly?" Dmitri asked. Alara considered the question as she climbed the steps to join them. Who was she now? Not the orphan child recruited into shadow organizations, not the operative who'd burned buildings and eliminated targets, not the waitress hiding in plain sight. Someone new. Someone still being defined by choices yet to be made. "I'm still figuring that out," she said finally. "But whoever she is, she's done apologizing." Adrian smiled and opened the door. "Then let's find out together." They entered the estate, the door closing behind them with a solid sound that felt less like a cage and more like a shield. Inside, Mrs. Sokolov had prepared a late dinner, comfort food that none of them had eaten in years, the kind of meal that suggested home, regardless of the building that contained it. They ate together at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room, sharing stories about Vienna and laughing at the absurdity of confronting a Russian minister at a security gala. The laughter was real, unforced, the kind that came from surviving something terrible together. As the night deepened toward dawn, they discussed plans for the future. Adrian had operations that needed oversight, security consultations for legitimate businesses, intelligence gathering for clients who valued discretion, occasionally handling problems that required exactly the skill set they all possessed. It wasn't the legal career Alara had never had time to pursue, but it also wasn't the morally questionable shadow work of her past. It existed somewhere in between, gray rather than black, useful rather than destructive, purposeful without being sanctioned by organizations that pretended not to exist. "We're building something new," Adrian said as the conversation wound down. "Not criminal empire, not intelligence agency. Something that operates in the spaces between, solving problems other people can't or won't address. It won't always be clean or easy, but it will be ours." "Ours," Alara repeated, testing the word. It had been years since she'd belonged to anything, been part of something larger than herself. The last organization she'd joined had trained her to kill and then abandoned her when it became convenient. Maybe this would be different. Maybe it wouldn't. But at least this time she was walking in with her eyes open, choosing actively rather than being chosen. "There's one more thing," Adrian said. He pulled out a folder, set it on the table. Inside were documents, new identities, but different from the ones Alara had used before. These weren't designed to hide. They were legitimate credentials, background checked and verified, creating legal existences that could withstand scrutiny. "Alara Vance can become real," he said. "Not a ghost identity, but an actual person with history and documentation. Same for both of you." He looked at Elena and Dmitri. "You can stop hiding and start living, at least to the extent that's possible given our circumstances." Alara picked up the documents with her name, studying them. Birth certificate, social security card, passport, employment history, everything needed to exist as a real person in the modern world. It was a gift she hadn't expected, one she wasn't entirely sure how to accept. "Why?" she asked. "Because hiding is exhausting, because you deserve to exist as more than fabrications." Adrian's expression was serious. "And because I need people who are real, not ghosts. If we're building something together, it needs to be built on truth, not more lies." Truth. Another concept Alara had complicated relationships with. But maybe Adrian was right. Maybe the foundation they needed was honesty, at least between themselves, even if the work required deception with others. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate but genuine. "For this. For everything." "Don't thank me yet. The work starts tomorrow, and it won't be easy." He smiled, "But I think we're up to it." They dispersed to their rooms as dawn broke over the estate, exhaustion finally claiming them all. Alara climbed the stairs to her room, no longer a guest room but simply her room, and stood at the window watching sunrise paint the grounds gold. Somewhere in Vienna, Konstantin was probably doing the same, watching dawn and calculating his next moves within the narrow confines of their agreement. Somewhere in the world, other former operatives were waking to another day of hiding, hoping they'd survive whatever came next. But Alara was here, alive, with purpose and protection, and the beginning of something that might eventually feel like belonging. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined 3 years ago when she'd first become Alara Vance, the waitress. It wasn't even the ending she'd imagined a month ago when Adrian first walked into the Velvet Iris. But it was an ending that felt honest. She was dangerous, yes, broken in some fundamental ways that might never fully heal, haunted by choices made and people lost. But she was also alive, choosing to be exactly what she was, refusing to apologize or hide anymore. In a city ruled by fear and power, she'd found her place beside someone who understood both, not as a servant or a weapon or a ghost, but as an equal partner in whatever came next. Alara Vance pulled the curtains closed, blocking out the dawn, and finally allowed herself to sleep without watching the door. The nightmares would come, as they always did. Memories of Moscow and Singapore and Tbilisi, of missions completed and teammates lost, of the person she'd been and the person she'd become. But when she woke, there would be work to do, problems to solve, a life to build from the ashes of everything that had burned before. And for the first time in 3 years, that thought didn't terrify her. It felt like possibility. The night Alara Vance spoke in a dead language, she signed her own death warrant. But she also signed something else, a declaration that she was done being invisible, done hiding, done pretending to be anything less than exactly what she was. From hunted survivor to dangerous strategist, from ghost to force, from nobody to someone who mattered. The transformation was complete, and the city would learn to respect it,